You ready for the fun?
Can you hear me, Gretchen?
I can. I can hear you fine. We're going to have an awesome meeting. I'm so glad everyone's here. And whenever you say we're ready, Rob.
We are ready. We're live.
Okay, welcome everyone to our short workshop today, right, Ms. Dorner, or Dr. Dorner? We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll use Dr. Dorner's flag back there. If you could please rise, and Dr. Dorner, if you could lead us.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have 4 board members. Is Mrs. Young joining us today?
No, she was working with IT. She's out of the state in a non-internet area. She was trying to use her hotspot, but it's not working.
Okay.
She
So
may show up, but for now, no.
Okay, so we have 4 board members present, and we have item 4 on the agenda is to move to terminate the employment of Nicholas Long Delorme for reasons stated in the confidential memo to the governing board. Is Ms. Mareshi going to address this?
Yes, Mr. President and members of the board, good morning. It is the recommendation of the district that we move to terminate the employment of Mr. Long Delorme for the reasons stated in the confidential memo to the governing board.
And we do not need an executive session. Is he going to be present today?
He has not reached out to us, so no.
Okay. So do we have a motion or any questions? Oh, you're on mute, Ms. Shumway.
I'll make the motion.
I saw your lips moving. We have a motion
I'll second it.
and a second by Ms. Weiser. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item 7, discussion and possible approval on a return to learn manual.
Mr.
Dr.
President,
Dorner.
Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for meeting with us this morning. I just want to give a very brief shout out to all the faces on this screen who represent our board members and our task force leaders. I also want to commend our KUSD staff members and our parents for an incredible amount of support through collaborative conversations. We've had excellent turnout to surveys, as you've seen. We've surveyed staff and parents, and we're averaging over 500 returns from staff each time we ask a question. So we appreciate their input. With that input comes a variety of perspectives. And so that also gives the challenge that we know how many perspectives are out there, and we need to come together with a unified vision and mission going forward. So that's what we've tried to do with our manual. A lot of time and effort has gone into this manual. It's live for you as board members right now. It is live. I gave it to the principals yesterday. And then after the workshop today, when we put some of our final edits into place, I'll make it live for the entire KUSD staff and then publish it for our community. People are anxious about school reopening and what that will look like in KUSD. So we will not read the entire manual, do not worry. During this workshop, there are a lot of pieces that go in, a lot of moving parts and pieces to preparing for opening during a continued pandemic. We will pause during the safety portion of the manual when it comes to masks. That's probably the item we need to have the most conversation about. So I will move out of the manual into a slide presentation for considerations regarding whether or not we mandate or encourage masks or have a combination. So with that, I'm just going to kick it off. I will share my screen so you won't, I don't think you'll see me anymore. I don't remember, Mr. Pope, if it goes straight to the screen or not, but each task force leader will give an overview of their section, and then entertain questions from board members. So as you can see, and you have had access to, I hope you've had a chance to at least skim through it. Our Return to Learn guide starts with a message from myself. You can navigate it through the table of contents, jump to any section that you're interested in. But it's basically broken into sections on safety, teaching and learning, finance, and human resources. So I believe we've covered a lot of information in those 4 sections. Hopefully you guys are fine that we are publishing you as our main communication point. You're in the manual. I'll have those communications go through Starlet Singer should the staff members or community have something they'd like to add or ask or say to a board member. I will represent the district as the public information officer regarding the Return to Learn or the reopening in collaboration with the governing board. We will make good use of our new parent liaison, and then there's information for each school. So Director of Special Education Services, Vicki Trujillo, took on the lead as our safety task team leader in collaboration with Devin Catron, who joined us as our facilities manager. So I will have Vicki begin to review now all overview of the aspects of safety on our Return to Learn guide. And then, as I said earlier, I will pause, move out of the guide and into a slides presentation when she hits the point of discussing masks. So Director Trujillo, I'll hand the mic to you.
Hi, good morning. Mr. President and members of the board, the safety committee met several different times to review safety procedures along with recommended cleaning protocols for KUSD to ensure our students could be safe. Working with Donnie from procurement or the warehouse, Donnie helped us get into contact with the different vendors. And after doing research, we chose to go with Hilliard Products, which provided us with the necessary products where our teachers could clean their classrooms throughout the days, along with extra custodial staff. Some of the highlights that we're talking about doing is having that COVID custodian, hiring an extra custodial staff to work throughout the day to disinfect and clean the common areas such as door handles, bathrooms, drinking fountains on a schedule per campus where they go around and they really disinfect a minimum of every 2 hours. We're working with technology and Devin to work on an ultraviolet light to clean our technology so that students will have that technology readily accessible. In the interim, while we're working with the ultraviolet light, we have a alcohol solution that we're going to use to disinfect computer technology. And so then we went through and little things like making sure we change those trash liners every night so we get all of that contamination out. We've ordered microfiber cloths because they're going to help us disinfect better than the regular cloths. We have hand sanitizer. We actually have a lot of sanitizer already on campuses. We ordered all the hand sanitizers along with sanitizing stations for our cafeterias. And we're really going to promote that washing your hands regularly when students enter and leave classrooms, enter and leave the cafeteria. Whenever they're transitioning, that hand washing is going to be a really big push in all the classrooms and a requirement. So that's a little bit about the cleaning. The cafeteria, we're going to have less kids in the cafeterias, but we're going to make sure they're disinfected and cleaned in between classes. Elective courses such as band and arts can continue with all the disinfection procedures in place. We have a disinfecting product that takes 5 minutes of contact time. That's a real big thing we've learned to ensure that things are cleaned. You have to leave them on the surface as long as the manufacturer has listed. Playground, we have a plan in place to clean the playground equipment, the balls and the jump ropes in between student usage. Devin did some research and found that when the playground temperature is over 100 degrees, I believe it was, that we don't have to necessarily disinfect the swing and the slide because they're that hot during the day. We plan on after-school and activities and clubs to continue with limited numbers, and those teachers will continue to follow all of those disinfecting protocols. In the library, we talked about having set books that students can choose from, so they can still have that option and that chance to read, but we don't want students going through and pulling every book off the shelf as they decide what they want to read. So that's a little bit about our cleaning part. I can move on to transportation unless someone has any questions about cleaning.
I had a couple questions, Mr. Hugh. The first one is the COVID custodian. Is that I don't remember, is that a full-time position? And do we have one in each building, or how was it determined where they would be located?
It's going to be a full-time position. And I believe we're going to be hiring them from like allied forces, and there will be one in each building because our current custodians don't have the time in their day to physically go through and do the amount of cleaning that's needed to keep everyone safe.
Are there some buildings that would need more than one and some that would just need one based on the population of the building?
As of right now, we only have one. I'm going to let Dr. Dorner, I think she has something to add.
That's okay. Yeah, those are some of the things that we talked about, you know, custodian to pupil ratio and those kinds of things. And so as we move forward, we will take a look at each need by campus. And if the COVID custodian can't reach all the areas, we're prepared to add resources.
Okay. And then you had talked about, you said there's going to be a hand washing push. So what does that look like? And just, you're going to have to remind me, like, are there sinks in the elementary classrooms where those kids can wash their hands more frequently than the high school kids, or what's the setup for that?
So all the elementary school classrooms have those sinks where the teachers can have those students wash hands in between transitions in the classroom, when they're leaving or exiting, especially at the elementary level, when those kids go down to a restroom, even though we know they're supposed to be washing their hands in the bathroom, when they immediately enter the classroom, they're going to re-wash their hands. All classrooms will have sanitizer. So if they don't have a sink accessible, they can sanitize their hands frequently throughout the day. But really, we want, when kids enter and when kids leave, have their hands sanitized and during those transitions in that classroom. But we also wanted to have soap and water because that's really important. And we also have signage that's going to go in all the bathrooms, above the sinks in the elementary and then the high schools, to remind the kids you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds and just really teach that proper hand washing.
Okay. And then you had also mentioned that, I thought you said there's going to be less kids in the cafeterias. Those
Okay, so less kids in the cafeteria.
Spread out over a longer period of time, so there's going to be different periods where the kids are.
So in the cafeteria, there's going to be signage available. There's going to be spaces in between the students' areas. They're going to have extra serving stations, and it's going to be a contactless serving where the kids can pretty much just pull out their lunch. They have a little cart they've created. It'll still have the hot entree. And then Mr. Fielder, Keith, is going to be working with each building principal and figure out their lunch schedule so we can have a larger window of lunch if we need to. And by having extra serving lines, that's going to also reduce the number of people. I think we lost him.
Yep. I have a question, and maybe you'll be able to pop back in while I'm asking. Financially, when we add these new staff members, because I assume there'll be even more than just the custodians that we're adding. Is this a part of the, am I correct that there are extra funds that were being sent from the state for COVID? And those extra funds would be handling this?
There are some extra federal funds, Beth, but there's no way to handle all of this with just those funds. So like I said at the budget meeting, that I was able to carve out an extra $700K on top of the 1.6 from the federal government. So we're working with about 2.3 million here, and anything discussed here, unless noted, would be included in that money.
Okay, awesome. I also had a question. You mentioned band. And because the CDC, the experts, whatever, are talking about the surfaces are not as critical as anything airborne. Band is going to have a lot of forced air born from these kids. And
Yeah, we're going to meet with special area people and make specific procedures based on their course. So like the library Vicki talked about, they can't just go through and pick any book they want. In the band, they're going to either approach it differently or have a different setup. The PE teachers want to have a meeting with what PE looks like. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The special areas are of great concern when it comes to having a specific procedure.
Right. I was just envisioning the kids trying to be in the thinnest mask possible and blowing through it, which would be possible, but it'd be if they build up their lungs, that's for sure. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thanks. We're taking notes on every question you have to make sure they're fully addressed.
All right, should I keep going on with transportation?
I just want to jump in real quick because I got
Okay.
the death and had to come back in.
Yeah.
So what we've gone over is extracurricular events. We've gone over specials.
We went over primarily the cleaning process for every room. So like in an elementary lab, the computer teacher would make sure their hands are disinfected and cleaned in and out of the computers.
Okay, thank you.
All right, transportation. This is where we had to develop a way or come up with a plan where we could get kids as safe as possible to school. And so what with transportation, students will be required to wear a face mask on the school bus, and they're going to enter from the back to the front and have assigned seating. The school buses will also have hand sanitizer, so the students will sanitize their hands, and they'll get on the bus in their assigned seat, loading from the back to the front.
So Vicki, they'll come through the regular door and then start loading. They're not coming in the back.
Correct. They'll come through the regular door, but they have to go to the very last seat. That way we don't have kids seated and more kids passing by them. And then when they arrive at school, that's when they'll do their health screening. And then in the afternoon, the teachers are going to remind the students of the bus procedures again.
And Vicki, will you talk a little bit about what happens if the kiddo gets on the bus with no mask?
If the students get on the bus with no mask, we have a face shield that they're going to wear. They're going to sit in one of the first 2 or 3 seats, and they have 3 chances. After the 3rd chance where they don't have their face mask on the bus, they will not be riding our school buses for the rest of that semester. Okay, special education is going to go a little differently because we do have that assistant on that bus and the parents meet them at the stop. The kids will actually be screened before they get on the bus. And that's on our curb-to-curb buses. On the bus, we'll keep the windows open when possible, so that will help. And then drop off and pick up. The district with busing, one thing we're doing is our special needs are curb-to-curb buses. Those buses typically, when they arrive at school, there's kids take a little longer to get off the bus. When we're leaving to go home, sometimes they take a little longer, and that can create that little bit of congestion. So we're going to have the curb-to-curb students come a little bit later and stay a little bit later. So that'll help us have that staggered drop-off time. And then we're going to have the building principals develop a plan on their campus to stagger the drop-off time for those parents who need to drop off their kids. So we have less of that congestion in the morning. and parents are going to be dropping off their kids. From an elementary perspective, it's not that walk in and walk to your classroom. They're going to drop off and not enter the building. And then we're talking about the restroom procedures. We're going to limit the number of kids based upon the building and the restroom size. That way we have less students there. The COVID custodian can be, when they're walking around, they're going to be able to notice. So we'll have a lot of deterrence from kids trying to increase. Our campus security will continue to walk around. And then for ventilation, we really want to leave what doors we can open when possible, especially before school. Opening those front doors or the playground doors for the kids to come in can really reduce that contact time, and it increases the ventilation. Any questions before we go into the cafeteria?
Will you be addressing the water fountains, or have we skipped over that?
The water fountains, what we're doing is they're going to be disinfected regularly, and students are going to be encouraged to have a water bottle. And then in the elementary setting, they're going to teach the kids how to actually fill, and the teachers are going to be filling the bottles at first.
When you say regularly, you mean after each student?
As often as the COVID custodian can go through, because we don't have water bottle stations at every campus.
Mrs. Trujillo, I was a little confused on when you were talking about wearing masks on the school bus. If a student forgets their mask, they get a face shield instead?
Correct. We have some face shields on the buses. So if a student doesn't have a mask, they'll put that face shield on. They'll have to sit in one of the first couple seats. And then after 3 times of not wearing that mask, they will not ride the bus. There's no way to screen the child when they get on the bus. So that's why we feel the face masks are our best ways to protect our kids, because we can't put kids 6 feet apart. We don't have a bus fleet capable of doing that.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So the children are not screened before they get on the school bus?
No.
They're not screened.
And that's why we're doing the masks and the hand sanitation.
I'll jump in. Dr. Lucero, we went round and round about this. Our original idea and plan was to screen them getting on the bus. I met with Jerry Woolsey and Tandy, the transportation manager, and we looked at every bus route, how many kids were at the bus route, who would screen them. We mathematically calculated how long it would take, how it could push the bells back. We really visited it at length. And then you can't have the bus driver do it. You would have to add a person to the bus, because every time, if the bus driver does it, they have to turn the bus off and put it in, lock it into place. And all these little pieces were adding time and space, to the loading of the bus and the getting of the school. So when that didn't seem feasible, I mean, we could purchase the thermometers, but 40 bus routes, adding a paraprofessional to 40 bus routes really increases the cost there. And when you only have so many resources, you have to really look at where you want to spend them. So the best alternative was to require masks on the bus. But we also need our kids and our families, if wearing a mask on a bus is going to be mandated, and riding a bus is a privilege, not a right. We don't have to provide transportation. We want to. Then they need to ride it properly. And we're going to provide the masks. So we'll provide it. You put it on, you get on the bus, you ride in a safe manner, and everything will be fine. And if you can't do that, then maybe you can't ride the bus.
So we're providing, that's where I was getting confused. I thought Vicki said that if they forget their mask, but we're providing the mask. So how would they?
Not as they're getting on the bus. They will. So our plan is, when we get to the mask area, one of our proposals is to provide 4 cloth masks per staff and student, whether it's encouraged or mandated. And so by providing those 4 cloth masks, they would have the mask in their possession to put on and get on the bus. We cannot hand a mask to a child every time they get on the bus and then have them deposited in something as they're getting off, and then launder them on a daily basis after 40 routes. And this is where, hours and hours of planning and conversation go into the one recommendation. So they'll have the masks, and, if Gretchen Dorner is the 3rd grader at Surbat Elementary and I'm a bus rider, I'll have my masks, and I know I need to put it on before I get on the bus. If I forget once, twice, 3 times, there'll be a provision. But if I can't remember to do that on a regular basis, then bus riding is not, is not an option.
And what does this face shield look like? I guess I'm not understanding, why wouldn't we just use like those little blue disposable masks instead of a huge face shield that a kid has to wear?
Well, we talked about a lot of that. One thing that has to do with the disposable ones, it does become pricey. It really does. If you're looking anywhere from 60 cents to $1.12 per mask, and it starts to happen on a regular basis. And the CDC does not recommend that schools utilize those paper. The CDC says in their literature, please leave the N95s and the paper mask stocks intact for medical facilities. They recommend we use cloth, and then that's why we are discussing cloth. But hey, that's why we're here collaborating. If that is what you would like us to look at, is keeping a box of those paper instead, that's open for discussion.
No, I know you guys have talked about it a lot, so.
The benefit of the face shield is it can be disinfected after each student and reused. I think what you're talking about is the one with the headband.
Yeah.
It has like a plexiglass.
Yeah, just a quick reuse.
Headband.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, it'd be quick. I can see how it might be scary to young students, but reality is.
Right. And we don't want to set anyone aside and create stigmas. The whole social emotional piece is very important to us too. So we don't want to say, you're a bad child, here's your screen, sit in that seat, and then have them feel less than included. But we also need our procedures to become systematic and followed. It's a tough one. We can leave that, one piece open for discussion a bit longer if you like.
Can I interject?
Yep.
Can I interject one thing? Ask one question. Will the kids be, once they have a mask, even if you give it to them and it's their mask, are they going to have a way to put their name on it so that somebody doesn't get somebody else's mask?
Yep, that's a good point, Mr. Ricca. I would assume, I would assume and shouldn't assume that would happen, so we can write a procedure for that. We are building a procedure to avoid cross-contamination, because one of the CDC and the Arizona Department of Health recommendations is to have a plan for storage of that mask, because that's a concern. They come off and they get traded, and we're spreading more germs through masks than we are without. So we definitely need a name procedure and a storage procedure.
Just like pencil boxes.
We only need a storage procedure if they're going to be taking them off.
Well, they will be coming off. I mean, that's not avoidable. You can't wear it from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. without it ever coming off. I see it's open for debate face, but they have to eat and they have to drink, and you're not supposed to lift it to your head or put it on your neck. That's also a recommendation.
Can you briefly talk about the child who lives in Dolan Springs and they're just going to have to wear the mask for a long time? Are there some bus routes where the buses aren't full, where we're going out to remote areas where it may be a little different for them, or is it just going to be a strict policy that all children wear masks on the bus?
Right now, our recommendation is you ride a bus, you wear a mask. We haven't talked about if there's 6 kids on a bus and you can 6 feet apart them, or one every other seat.
It's still in an enclosed space. So, I mean, even with the windows open, it's still in an enclosed space. So I think we just have to leave I believe we would have to leave that as standard all across. I am curious. I'm curious if we would be able to get like lanyards or little, like eyeglass holder things, something like that could be used to hold masks when they don't have them on their face. Just an option.
I like pencil boxes, those little plastic ones that close.
I like the lanyard idea because it doesn't leave their person, which keeps their germs with them. Or pencil boxes, yeah.
Those little alligator clip things that dentists use to put the bib on, maybe.
Yep.
Mrs. Dorn or Ms. Trio, I had one other. You said there were 40, we have 40 bus routes, is that correct?
I think it's 39, Ms.
Or
Wilson.
somewhere, okay.
Right.
How many of those routes have monitors on them already?
Those are the routes without monitors. All the special education routes have monitors. That's why we can screen them at the stop, but the general ed does not have monitors.
So if there's a bus monitor, then the passenger is having their temperature taken before they get on the bus?
Correct.
Monitor?
Because
Okay.
with that curb to curb, the parent is typically there so they can take the student home if they can't get on the bus.
Well, I learned something because I thought we had some monitors on some bus routes. But
when I talked with Candy, she said my sped routes have monitors, the other ones do
Right.
not. Occasionally we may have a monitor if there's a behavior issue or a medical need.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
you're welcome. All right.
Bus monitors are a very expensive proposition on a regular day. It would be very nice if we could have one on every bus to support bus drivers.
All right. So we'll keep going and we'll talk a little bit about the cafeteria. I know we briefly talked about it a minute ago. They're going to work on continuing to have those self-packaged meals. They will still have their hot option along with some cold options. Mr. Fielder can set up at least 2 serving stations per school. That way we can keep kids as far apart as possible so that they can eat in a safe manner. The safety task force talked about it and really wanted the kids to be able to eat in the cafeteria, outside, and leave the teacher classroom only at teacher discretion. We have the sanitizing when they go in and out of the cafeteria, they'll sanitize their hands. That way we're sanitizing after our hands have been in our mouth eating. And then even Mr. Fiedler also said when kids get off the bus in the morning at some of the schools where they don't require lunch cards, they'll be able to just get their breakfast and go in and to avoid lines in the morning. So he really wants to work with each individual campus to make the cafeteria service as safe as possible. We have directional signages, floor markers coming in, things to really promote how the kids are going to stay apart and still stay safe. And one of the exciting things is many of our schools don't even have to use lunch cards anymore. Some of them just get to come in and you get as much of the food as they want. And then he also wants lunch cards, ID cards at every campus that does have to have a card, so they don't have to touch the keyboard and enter their number. So any questions on the cafeteria?
For those schools that do require it, they're touching the keypad, correct?
Well, he's going to have a scan. So he's going to have a scanner, Ms. Shumway, where that they can go ahead and just scan a barcode. Okay. So he wants those keypads gone because there's too many people touching it.
Again, a good thing to have for a lanyard or those alligator clips. I like that.
You read my mind. I'm thinking, okay, we have 2 things for their lanyard now.
All right, and then now we're going to talk about student health screening. We want all the students and parents, we're really going to promote, hey, check yourself at home before you leave. If you have a fever, if you have any of these symptoms, you need to stay home. We're not doing attendance awards this year. That will really help, especially on the elementary level. You don't get perfect attendance because we want kids to stay home when they're sick.
Can we advance the slide?
Yeah, right.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're
I'm a
good.
visual learner.
You were there, almost right there. So then we're going to talk about screening. When students get to campus, the sites will have different screening points. We'll have a walker entrance. We'll have where kids get dropped off at the bus entrance. We're going to have staff members there to do a screening on the student. What that screening will consist of is pretty much scanning them. If they have a fever with that contactless thermometer, they're going to have a mask put on, or they'll go to the health attendant's office and the health attendant will assess that student for symptoms of COVID. And if the student has a fever, the student goes home. It's that simple. So it's going to be really important that parents provide us with that contact information. And if we can't get a hold of a parent, we're going to go to that emergency contact, work with our transportation department, and if we need to, our school resource officers to ensure that those students go home. We're going to say, hey, you have a fever, you're not coming to school. For the student to return to school, they need to have their COVID symptoms gone. There's actually, we have a link, a hyperlink we put in there. There it is, the hyperlink. And that's for parents to look through. This is a release from isolation guidelines. It's published by the Department of Health. And it tells the parent how to know when they can come back to school. So this is really going to be beneficial. And we're also going to have the parents contact our health attendants if they have any questions. Actually, the student should stay away for 10 days. They have a fever, 72 hours, they have to stay home. But if they have symptoms of COVID, they really need to stay away for 10 days until all those symptoms, since the symptoms first appeared. And then parents may choose to voluntarily quarantine or isolate their children if someone's been in close contact with them. And then we want the parents to contact our health attendant. Yes.
Is there a procedure or a place, if they have COVID symptoms, we're expecting them to be out, but are we going to direct them to a place to get tested? And if so, who's communicating the results to the school? Because, I mean, the school should have those results, but I don't know if we're privy to them.
I don't think we get to know them. I don't think legally we get to know them. That's why we're telling the parents they need to stay away for the 72 hours plus the 10 days if they haven't had symptoms.
And if the parent wants to provide that and say they have a medical release or a negative test result and they want to re-enter sooner than that, they can.
Correct.
And where are we directing them to get tested?
I don't think we legally can direct them to get tested. We can make recommendations, but we can't force someone, I don't believe, to be tested.
Where are we recommending they get tested?
I know LabCorp and SonoraQuest has COVID tests. I mean, I just did the antibody one at LabCorp. It was $10.
That's a great thing that we can add to that. The health attendants can say, hey, mom, Johnny's going home. He has a fever. This is what he has to do to come back to school sooner than this time frame. That's a great point, Ms. Shelby.
And a list of those places to go.
No, that's excellent. We
will create that resource and then we'll share that with you.
Thank you. That was excellent, Dad. All right. So now we're on to masks. Ms. Dorner, do you want to take over?
So this is the big one. Everything's big and important, but mandating or encouraging or having a procedure for masks is of utmost interest to staff and students and families. Our surveys, which I shared with you, show the wide variety of perspectives. There are some emotions attached to it. In some cases, science that we've referenced in cases, recommendations by entities such as the CDC and the Arizona Health Department have been reviewed. And we even have some legal opinions that were shared with us through our Arizona School Administrators President. So this is all just setting up context for us right now. And some of you have been able to see this ahead of time. But for anybody that's watching our live stream, we're setting up context so that we know the entire situation that we're facing. And I am pausing and I will take a little longer on this section than we have on previous. So as we see it, these are our options as a group to select from, if you will. We can not mandate or encourage, just say masks are not necessary, but have them available if someone wants it. We can strongly encourage them and have a supply. We say disposable in there because there is that whole, to provide disposable or cloth. It's just one of the options. We can mandate masks and supply one per day to staff member, but you'll see in a minute the cost that goes with that. We can mandate cloth and supply a week's worth to each staff and student. We can mandate and not supply and make it the responsibility of the family. So those are some of the basic options. If we do not mandate, nor do we encourage, the cost would be relatively minimal. to have 40,000 masks available as people felt the need to use one. They would just be available, the boxes we located in general areas. We would remain neutral, neither for or against. This is in line with how the community seems to be treating masks. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just a point of information. And then it would be our job to make sure no one is ridiculed for a personal decision. So that is no encouragement, no mandate, no mandate. We can have no mandate and strongly encourage the use of masks. The same thing, we would have them available through district purchase for anyone who wanted one. The same, box location around the building. In this case, we would be strongly for that, but make it clear that we're not mandating it. And then we would ensure staff and students are not ridiculed and provide accommodations for those who would like one but can't wear the traditional style. So no mandate, strong encouragement. Mandate and provide disposable. We talked about this, we kind of foreshadowed earlier in the conversation. It's really not feasible. If we provided a new mask to everybody every day, you can see the cost of over $600,000. Very expensive. We would have to have, if we mandated and provided those disposable masks, very clear communication. We'd have to consider different groups, whether we wanted to mandate preschool through 12 or at certain grade levels or ages. We'd have to recognize this is not in line with our general consensus or the majority consensus in the community or in the district staff, the 900 district staff. We would also have to provide staff and students who cannot wear mask accommodations similar to the other. So that's the third. We can mandate and provide reusable cloth masks as a fourth option. The cost for this, approximately, and Aaron has worked all of this out, and if he needs to jump in on this, he can. The 32,000 cloth masks would come at a cost of around $224,000. We would have the district mandate become crystal clear and written in the handbook, communication, have signage, principal statements, etc. We'd have to make sure to communicate to everyone, this has been mandated, you're provided with 4 masks. We would have major enforcement situations going on, which we'll talk about in a little while. And again, we'd have to provide accommodations to those who cannot wear a mask for any reason. The final option is to mandate masks, but do not cover the cost of masks. So in this situation, we would have to purchase some level of mask coverage for families who couldn't afford one, but everything else would stay the same. We'd have to communicate, be very clear in the responsibility that they have to wear them, clean them, etc. Consider the grouping, talk about enforcement issues, and provide accommodations. So if we review the options, no mandate, no encourage, just let it go. Strongly encourage the use of masks, mandate and supply disposable, mandate and supplies cloth, or mandate and don't supply at all.
Just Dr. Donor, can I say something really quick about
Absolutely.
the first two options for buying like the as needed disposable masks? Those are 80,000 masks at about 48,000. So double on both of those slides.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, so considerations. When you're considering a major policy or procedural decision or move, we have to consider everything. And so that's my job, is to hear what the perspectives are from everyone, to read the guidelines. Now, if something is illegal or a law, it is what it is, right? But when you're dealing with recommendations and guidelines where they clearly say it's not a legality or a law, then you have to really look at all the considerations before you make an organizational decision or mandate. So that's kind of what these next few slides are, is me or us, our group, unpacking our thought process as we approach this topic. So the types of face covering clearly are cloth, shields, or paper, or the N95s, or all the variety of medical type face coverings. The CDC recommends cloth face coverings to leave the supply available for medical personnel. They can also be laundered and reused for a reduced cost to the family or the district. We recommend face cloth coverings, and we are prepared to purchase 4 cloth coverings per employee and student. But I would have, the note on there that if we, and this is whether we encourage or mandate, we want to supply. But cost of replacement for lost masks should be up to the employee or the student. We would give that initial inventory. Shields are an option for staff who speak all day or have reasons for close-fitting cloth masks are restrictive to them. We've heard from a lot of staff members, and I'd have to say I'm going to put myself in that group where if I were to have a close-fitting mask on all day, it would be a huge struggle. You have folks with asthma or other kinds of things that are going on. So shields are an option. And there's a variety of them. I've started some research on them, on the comfort where they are. They even have them where you have the shield and it has something attached to the bottom that kind of lays over the shoulders. That would give them that kind of time and space, but the protection at the same time. So I would recommend that we allow staff and students to supply a personal face shield as an accommodation or an alternative to a cloth covering. And then finally, the paper, we don't recommend supplying them. If someone showed up in one, of course, we wouldn't make that student or staff take it off, but we would just not be the proponent of purchasing or supplying the paper form. All right. So when we're looking at our nurses or our health attendants, we already know, regardless of how we move forward, that health attendants and nurses will be provided with the face shields. As will district staff working with hearing impaired students, where the student needs to be able to read lips or have that facial interaction. The shields will be available. Like I said before, we are prepared to supply those cloth face mask covers, but we really need kids in the time and space that we wear them to get into the habit of keeping them. I love the ideas that we talked about earlier to avoid loss or cross-contamination. One thing we really have to take a closer look at, we've done a cursory or a top level look, is where they should be stored. We know students need to have a personal storage space. We can't have them on account. It can't be like every other classroom supply. Any of us that have been a classroom teacher, whose pencil is this? We can't be going, whose mask is this? And finding masks on counters or corners and then touching them, because we're just adding to the risk and the spread. So we will need a very specific personal storage plan by student. And I appreciate the ideas that we've already heard in this workshop. Monitoring the use of masks is the #1 concern of staff, teachers, and principals. If we are going to have masks on our staff and our students, that building of the culture will be incredibly important. And then we have to answer these 3 really difficult questions. What do we do if someone refuses to wear the mask? What's the procedure for reporting or investigating violation of our plan? And what are the rights of staff and students who refuse to wear a mask? So those would be 3 very important questions. It's easy to say everybody has to do it. It's harder to say, how do we deal with different situations, different needs, different accommodations, and help teachers not spend their entire day mask monitoring versus instructing?
I think it'll depend on, as far as wearing a mask or making it mandatory. I think it's going to be find out that because of the age of the students, the younger ones or the middle ones or whatever, would be a whole lot different than somebody in high school. They would have enough sense, really, or should have, to wear one. But I think some of the younger ones probably really wouldn't understand how bad they really need to wear.
Another consideration, again, it's just food for thought, information, things that we talked about. When you're going through a decision-making process, you have your vision, and then your preferred strategy, and then what are the risks based on your chosen preferred strategy. So if we did choose to mandate masks, knowing how our community and family members feel, it's just logical to review what that could do to our programs. So because more people are not, and this could be evolving as our world is changing, obviously. I'm trying to be kind of get very neutral, both sides of the perspective right now. And things could change as we move forward where none of these conversations matter. But for now, in the short term, our online program is costly. Running an online program and a live program at the same time does have cost associated with it. We do have to be prepared that if we mandate masks, and there are a large number of families that do not subscribe to that philosophy, they may switch from wanting on site to online, and we cannot support a significant increase in students going from on site to online. We have budgeted for a predicted number of online kids based on our parent surveys, but this could shift that information. It's important to know. So if we encourage the use of masks when other precautionary procedures are in place rather than mandate the use of masks by everyone all day, those who want to wear masks have the option of wearing them at school and applying for online, but those who don't want to wear them only have the option of online. So that's kind of what drove us to that conversation, that this could become very expensive, not in just purchasing a mask, but not being able to mandate it, then having them want to shift to online. This comes basically from the CDC and the National Health Organization conversations. I'm quoting in that top section of the slide. Keep in mind the Center for Disease, this is from our Arizona School Administrators Association's legal document that they prepared. Keep in mind the Center for Disease Control and Arizona Department of Health Services recommend face coverings should be worn for those over 2 years old when social distancing measures are impractical or impossible. So we looked at our school day to see if there are times and places where it is impractical to be able to socially distance ourselves. The main areas that we consider are classrooms, hallways, restrooms, buses, cafeteria, and the playground. We know that 6 feet apart at all times is not practical in most of our classes right now, depending on the numbers that arrive on August 3rd. We do know that K-5 grouping is consistent because recommendations do talk about if you can keep your group consistent with fewer transitions, that does help. 6-12 is very difficult to have anything but variety of groupings throughout the day. In our collaboration meetings, they talked about block scheduling or getting all of your, period 1 all in one day and all, a whole variety of models to try to reduce intermingling and grouping, but it's a pretty difficult venture. So we do recommend the consideration of masks as needed in classrooms, kind of to Bruce Ricka's point above the 3rd or 5th grade. The recommendation says 2, but I wonder about those really littles, the K, the 1, the 2, K 1st and 2nd grade kids, if that's feasible. We do not recommend mandating masks for programs in situations where staff or students cannot remove the mask themselves or have difficulty breathing. That again is straight from the recommendations. If a kiddo can't get the mask off of themselves, that's a liability in and of itself. We will have directional hallways with spacing to be effective. K-5 would be easier than middle school or high school. Those middle school, high school hallways are crowded. So I would recommend encourage masks in elementary hallways, but yes to masks in middle school and high school hallways, unless there's some sort of social distancing plan. But we've talked our way around that one a lot, and it's really hard to imagine reducing the crowds in the hallways at those middle and high schools. Restrooms, we can put in barriers into place. There's a lot of strategies to, put some space between people in the restrooms. But if we do require them in hallways, then restrooms are a natural extension. So especially at that middle school and high school level. We are recommending mandated masks on buses. We do recommend encouraged masks in cafeterias, on your way in and on your way out, or in whatever situation it looks like. Obviously, they have to remove them to eat. Social distancing is possible in a playground with correct procedures in place. And again, any of us who are teachers and have had yard duty, I know what a playground looks like, or a high school common area looks like. Kids are social and they want to be around each other. And so we do need to take all of those situations into account, but we do recommend encouraging them on the playground unless there's no possibility of spacing them. And I'm trying to get, I don't know if you can see that last part, but I feel very strongly about safety and prioritizing our strategies around keeping our people safe. I 100% do. But I think it's important to build in time and space for them to have a break from having that mask on. Maybe somebody in this group has worn a mask from sun up to sundown and talked all day long and they're fine. But to me, that's a big ask to be wearing it all day long without any opportunity to take it off. So our vision and our overall recommendation before we open it up to the board for a fantastic conversation is that, yep, safety is number one for us. We have to mitigate the risk of disease spread, and we have to create an environment where staff and students feel comfortable and accepted making personal decisions regarding their own health and safety. We have a lot of detailed procedures in our guide that we are just getting into before we took this pause. We want to encourage masks and have them available and build an environment of inclusion to continue as one of our priorities. But I feel like we can write a plan that is fair, safe, and equitable, that encourages and mandates. I don't know that it has to be an all or nothing venture. Can we encourage part of the time and mandate where we know it must happen or must occur? Is there a way to have a hybrid plan of both encouragement and mandating the masks? So I will open it up for questions and conversation and ideas and anything that happens.
I'll put in a couple cents here. Number one, I want masks mandated. That's my space where masks can be removed, if we're able to social distance, all of that kind of good stuff, based on the teacher or whoever is the adult in charge at the time. And I know you can write that very well. Another thing out is that we're a branch of the state government. So we can require and enforce. Enforcement in our case would be, sorry, you're not allowed in this school. You're not allowed on the bus, those kind of things, obviously.
Right, but then we have to provide an alternate delivery model for them.
Yes, and remember, I know alternates are, if they leave our district, then what we provide, then we don't get the budget, but alternates are available as far as they can homeschool. They can't, as far as state law, there is the ability to homeschool.
Right, but if we're offering on-site and online,
we hope they'll go online.
Well,
if they can't continue with the masks.
I feel like they would have that option. I guess what I'm asking is, if we mandate them and they refuse or they can't wear them and we say you can't come into the building if you're not wearing it, that's clear, I get that. Then we have to be prepared to say, all right, then you have equal access to the online as everybody had from the very beginning. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe
that will become costly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that, but
Okay.
if we can at all do that, I think that's the direction we need to be in.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure I was getting it.
Yeah. And then the other part of it is, this, because of what Ducey put in for state official, smaller municipalities can mandate for themselves. Same with school districts. Well, the city of Kingman has mandated anybody going into Kingman buildings, city buildings, have to wear a mask. So it would keep it consistent if we're also have the same requirement.
Right, and they can take it off when they come out, and they're probably only going in for a short period of time. And I truly have no desire to sound antagonistic. I hope everybody understands I'm looking at all sides of it. And that's kind of why I mentioned on here that it could become a reality. It's really headed that way regardless, based on municipality, CDC, or Arizona Department of Health decisions. And then there's a language play in there where you say government buildings versus public buildings. And that's sort of what's being debated right now. Yep.
Dr. Dorner, can you, the last sentence there that's bolded, where mandated masks used based on the time and place, like what's an example of where we might want to mandate them? Are you talking about like the school buses? Is that an example?
Like the school buses, or in middle school, high school classes where there's really no way to space the kids apart. Anytime where common sense says there's a lot of people close together, put your mask on.
What's an example, like just an example of like a class? Like, what are you thinking?
Like there might be a class at a high school that has 36 kids in it, and you have to turn sideways to walk down the aisle. You can't just, you know what I mean?
Right.
They could reach out and touch each other. That's a dangerous situation.
But before we get to that point, are we going to try to limit the size of that class, or would that be an example of we have to have that many students in the class or else they can't graduate? Is that?
We are trying to limit the size of classes. That's why we offer the online option. And so by the families who choose the online option will by nature reduce the size of the classes, but it's hard to say. Once we kind of come to our agreements as a group here, a collaborative group, and then we launch this, we have our online application ready to launch immediately. We need real numbers to start really knowing what we're dealing with.
Let me rephrase. So maybe I don't understand the enrollment process for classes, but are there some classes where once the class hits X amount of students, they do not let any more students in that class? And I guess that'd be more along the lines of electives versus like the core classes.
Yes, that is true. We do have, well, our district ratio pre-pandemic and even now, we haven't changed it, at a high school level, for example, is 34-1. So when we usually have a 10% window when kids are applying for a high school elective class, if it gets to 37, they may let it go, understanding not everyone will show up. If it's a necessary, and that would be more on electives. If it's a necessary class, like our dual enrollment classes at the last campus I was on, could get very large because you didn't want someone to miss an opportunity of a dual credit English 101, 102. So you might let it go to 40. Otherwise, you've got 10 kids in there that don't get the chance to have it if you can't add another section.
Okay.
So it's very dependent on the needs of the student and the available seats.
So are you thinking in terms of this, policy that we're leaving options open for the school once they see what the classroom setting is and they see like, hey, this is a large class, so we are going to mandate masks in this class?
No, I think we need more of, I hate to use the word control, but I think we need more consistency than that. If we just say everybody decide on your own, I think that could be a problem in and of itself. So what I'm saying is we can say with pretty fair certainty that middle school and high school classes are going to have a very difficult time having the 6 feet between them. If a lot of kids go to online and you were to lose, every other student in those schools, then you might have that space. But I think they should have masks with them and available in those crowded situations. It's tough. I mean, I don't want to wear one all day, and I'm sure many other people don't, but if we can't, go ahead.
No, if you had, okay now. I was wondering, in all of your planning and scheming, trying to come up with ideas and stuff, is there any possibility of having split sessions?
Well, we had talked about
Or you
that.
cut a class in half or something.
We had talked about split sessions at the first workshop and had migrated away from that. The concern, like alternating days or split sessions, was that kids were only going to have instruction 2 days a week versus 4, that it might increase the gap, is what I remember us talking about. But I mean, it's on here. I mean, I can go backwards to alternate days is what we had originally looked at in one of the workshops, where some kids come, there could be 4-day weeks for qualifying kids if they were in a special program and they needed to be there. There could be alternate days, Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday, where you have 2 days alive and 2 days at home. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Ricca?
Well, anyway, to be able to cut the size of the classes down at one time, as far as, your social distancing or stuff, whether it goes.
I think we lost Mr. Ricca. I don't know if he's still. Carol Young would like to call in on my phone or stars. Mr. President, other board members, do you want me to get her on the phone?
Sure.
For sure. Yeah.
You want to call on mine or yours?
We can call on mine. And can we check on Mr. Ricca? He's in the other room, so he's behind me in that room. There he is.
Okay. Yeah, that was just, something that I guess more or less, had missed some information, I guess, as far as looking at that.
Hi, Carol.
Okay.
Bruce, we talked about that at the last one. The concern was they were really only getting direct instruction twice a week. And with the standards and the amount of material that they need, it can't be 2 days of direct instruction and 2 days of homework based on that direct instruction. That would just make it very difficult to really get all of the information to educate, really.
Yeah, I understand, and one of the other things you think about when you split a smaller classrooms and stuff, then you look at it, another teacher, and we're short teachers now anyway.
Aaron can jump in here, but to reduce our ratio from 34 at the high school, I think 32 down to, I think 27 when you get to the littles. Mr. Sherman, is it about $1 million every time you reduce that ratio by 1?
Yeah, as like a generic number, if the district was to have this generic student to teacher ratio, then yeah, it'd be $1 million to get that to go down 1.
So we're hoping, that's why we're going to have an awesome online program that we will reduce class size numbers by transitioning some of our kiddos into online from K all the way to 12. Preschool is doing a great job as it is, so I think they'll be fine, but online for the K through 12.
Does Carol want to jump in?
Carol? Carol?
Hello?
Ms. Chum, yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I missed the first part of the meeting. I couldn't get in on the Zoom meeting. I'm not sure what you discussed. I am concerned because reading the agenda in a workshop, you can't vote. You cannot vote on anything. It has to be placed as an agenda item on a board meeting or a special board meeting, not a workshop.
Right.
I don't know what transpires.
Oh, we're collaborating, and any recommendations we're willing to assimilate into our work.
Okay, that's all. I just want to make sure that nothing has been voted on.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So, Carol, what we're discussing right now, we've discussed basic cleaning procedures. and bus riding and cafeteria and general school procedures, but we are pausing on the discussion of mandating masks for who and when at what level. If you have a thought on that, it'd be a good time to share it.
Well, I don't believe in mandating the mask, but I think if the parents want their kids to wear a mask, they can. Or if we're going to have a online school, they should keep them home for an online school. I know you're going to have a talk from the teachers if you mandate it, and you're going to have talk from the teachers if you do so. That's just my opinion.
All right, thank you.
Is it my turn? Okay. So this isn't about beliefs. This is about science. This is about what we need to do. I remember being a teacher during the time when we mandated school uniforms and the uprising that occurred in that. But we had science behind us that said that this was important for social emotional. This was important for students to, be at an equal playing field. This isn't any different. And I would even propose that this isn't a COVID thing, because COVID is a thing that it is our right now, but you can talk to any parent, any teacher. When school starts, we all get sick. And this is just good procedures. These cleaning procedures, why would they ever go away? If we can truly clean and disinfect to keep our students safe from all communicable diseases, then we should, in my opinion. And science says that, these things contribute to future elements. So, and they keep kids out of school. So let's keep cleaning. Let's not stop that. As far as masks go, it is very uncomfortable. I've worn them probably for a maximum of 5 hours in a day. And boy, it does give your lungs a workout. Yes, it does. But apparently my lungs needed a workout. So, and I hear you about those that have asthma and other breathing conditions. They are going to have a hard time wearing these. But in that same sentence, I'm going to say those are the people that need us to wear them. They can't wear them, but they need everybody else to wear them. That's how it works. And so I would think that, knowing that this isn't going away anytime soon, as I predicted from the last time, to have a surge, we have to have a lull, and that lull has not even happened. We're still in first wave. So we're having to make these difficult decisions, and they are difficult, but we have to make them. And seeing what's happening in Bullhead with that daycare facility, those little kiddos are getting it, and then they're going to the families, and then those families go to Walmart, and there we go. We go from there. So we can't tell Walmart to require masks, but we are in a position to say, this works. This keeps us safe. This keeps our neighbors safe. And it's uncomfortable. I can't imagine trying to teach all day in it. We're muffled, we're muted. It's going to be difficult, but we're here to make a difficult decision. And I would love to see some built-in non-mask times and have some idea of what that looks like. But I think we should mandate masks for the time being, but really as part of a uniform policy, until we start to see this go away. And who knows when that will be. I don't think it's even going to be this school year. My other question is, I don't think we need to provide masks. as in we don't provide uniform. We do have them available, but if someone comes out of uniform, I know someone was asking, what do we do when they don't? Well, if someone comes without uniform, we call parents. Hey, bring them a shirt. Or you need to go home. This is our policy. This is what we're doing. So I don't know why this is any different. If this is what we're going to mandate, this is just like any other uniform requirement. So that's what I have. I have a couple other things, but it's not mask related. But in my opinion, I think this is a necessary evil for the necessary good.
Thank you, Jen. Dr. Lucero, you're muted.
Can you go back to the slide where you had the bolded sentence at the end and just talk about how you came up, how the staff came about that? You're muted now.
Unmute. Okay, Sharon, unmute.
Fair.
I'm not muted anymore, correct?
No, you're good.
Okay. So fair, safe, and equitable plan that encourages and mandates mask use based on the time and the place. The idea is fair, meaning we're not going to pick and choose. You know, this, like we talked about earlier, that this group can make a decision and that group can make a different decision. Fair means district-wide. Fair means if you can, you should. Fair means if you need an accommodation, we'll make sure that you have one. You know, unfair is casting the net without looking at any considerations based on individual needs or circumstances health-wise. Safe means we do want to keep our kids safe, our community safe, our staff members safe. So if we feel like some of our situations throughout the school day are not safe, then we by all means should make a provision or a mandate that creates that safety. And equitable, I kind of already talked about that we don't pick and choose, that we have a good rationale and a reason for the decisions we make. And then the hybrid of encouraging and mandating. Like right now, none of us are wearing masks. Not one of us is wearing a mask because we're in a time and a place, you know, we're in the board meeting in a space where we aren't around other people and it's feasible to not wear a mask. So what conditions and circumstances exist in a school or in a school day that allow that same thinking? You know, can a teacher take her mask off when her kids are at recess or a special in her room alone? Like, or are we just saying sun up to sundown, like it or not, wherever you are in the school, doesn't matter, wear a mask. So that's what I mean by encourage and mandate. We want to mandate safety, mitigate the risk of spreading the disease, but also be fair and safe about it, or equitable.
Does that mean that there might be certain classes where the mask is not mandated because the teacher has the ability to social distance?
Well, and that's what we started to kind of get wrapped around the axle a little earlier. There's not very many of those. There could be a pretty decent reduction of kids in classes based on our online model. In some classes, like some of our special education programs or our smaller, there might be a CTE high school class where there's 6 kids, they're in a shop and they're nowhere near each other. You know, there may be some outliers, but probably not as many as the norm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is this a good time to ask some other questions?
Yeah.
Okay. My concern is water fountains. I would like to see those plasticed off and a place for water bottle fill. Maybe it's a sink. Maybe it's a place where they can go to do it. I know there's a lot of rooms that have sinks in them. So I just see that as, and it's always been
I agree. Yeah.
a place for.
I would never use a water fountain personally.
No. And when, you've got those little kids, they don't know any different. And they think they need to suck.
The vision is a sloppy vision, isn't it?
Yeah. So I would
Okay.
like to see that germ factory removed from the equation.
Okay.
The other thing I'm thinking about is classroom materials, shared materials, manipulatives, and kind of what the procedure is going to be with that. Are we going to get there, or can we talk about that now?
Yeah, you can talk about it now, and we will get there at the same time. That's a concern too. If manipulatives are to be used, there has to be time and cleaning involved. So it's the use of manipulatives will likely be reduced because you have to clean them between the use of children. And as much as anyone can have their own kept to themselves, that's the plan. So we'll be training teachers on, things we never thought of before, right? We get out our tangrams and we're going to build, patterns. We're going to have kind of some stop sign guidance to all of that.
Okay. And what about funding because a lot of teachers buy their own material and they base their $250 as if that's all we spend, as if on the fact that we're going to share material. What kind of funding and opportunities are we giving teachers to provide materials for their classrooms?
To be honest with you, there's not a lot of money. Well, we could carve some out, and that's not true. I mean, there's always a way to carve money out for that kind of thing. Right now, all of our funding has gone into the idea of reducing classes by having online and adding custodians to increase cleaning. We have not taken the budget down to the classroom expenditures yet, but I will put that on our list because it is something we'll talk about, obviously, moving forward. We were just doing the big pieces now.
Yeah, nitty gritties.
Nitty gritty, but I have it on my list and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Thank you.
Can I interject with what, Jen, when you were talking about the water fill stations?
Yes.
Have we found out how much it would cost to switch our water fountains to water fill stations?
Yeah, and actually before, I don't have that on I do have those numbers, but not off the top of my head. I would hate to give you inaccurate information, but we've started that process already just by nature of the way the world has been headed. Kids don't want to drink in drinking fountains. They all have their water bottles. So both the high schools have water fill stations now. I know White Cliffs just transitioned to water fill stations. I can't remember if Kingman Middle's gone that way, but we've sort of started moving through, and Mr. Catron's on here, so I'll have him take a note on that. That's definitely something we want to do district-wide, Beth. Much better than a drinking fountain. Yeah. And even then, you have to have procedures because our own water system, our own Culligan man system here, you've got to be very careful when you're filling it that you have a good procedure and you're not contaminating the area.
Okay. As far as high school classes, yeah, the idea that, okay, I'm in English and we have, 45 students in the class, so mask, but then I'm going to go on to French and we have 4, not that we would, but that idea of having to flip back and forth, I think that's just going to be confusing and difficult to manage. And then that puts the onus on the teacher, which, we really don't want to do that. We want the teacher to have clear guidelines that they don't have to personally enforce because the school enforces them. So the more you mishmash and
right, it's like the dress code. If one teacher follows it and another doesn't, it makes it difficult for the one who does. Yeah. But I think we have to be, open and honest about the fact that when we move forward with any kind of mandating, we are adding a burden to the teachers all day, every day. It will be a nightmare, and they will spend a lot of time managing masks versus teaching.
I agree.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I'm with you. But again, with the uniform policy,
Which is a nightmare to this day.
Yeah, right, exactly. We still fight this, but it's something that the district has decided is willing and a necessary fight. So we wouldn't say, oh, you know, Joe Schmo shop teacher doesn't really care about uniforms. So it's all good to, you know, rip your shirt off. We're not. So in the same mindset, we have to know that it's going to be difficult, but we have to be clear and consistent. High school online offerings, are those going to be extremely limited? Because high school, you get to pick, you know, a la carte. But online options are probably going to be limited, yes?
No.
No.
Mrs. Woolsey, you can jump in there. We purchased the whole suite. The whole thing, correct?
Correct, including
Electives.
yeah, all of your special courses, CTE, even language, everything, the whole suite.
And I believe Dr. Klippenstein put out a message last week. MCC will not be transitioning to on-ground classes in the fall. So distance, I mean, DE, we're going to be dual credit. We're going to be considering that as well. So everybody's having to make these difficult. NAU just put a thing out there saying, don't come to Flagstaff, don't come to campus without a mask. So everybody in the entire town of Flagstaff will be expected to attend class masked. So I don't think
it's happening.
Yeah, I don't think this is too much. I think,
but I don't think they'll wear a mask on their way to class. They'll put it on when they get to class.
Yes, and I've had some labs that were 3.5 hour labs, you know, using a Bunsen burner. So they're not. It's not easy, but they've made that choice, and because they needed to. Are we going to have? I know at the last workshop, Beth requested a disclaimer saying that if you choose on ground, you understand that you may be exposed. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this. I saw that in your return to learn for staff, but I didn't see anything for students and families.
Yeah, we're working on those compacts. We're going to have one for transportation and then for school in general. Those are being written. Yeah, they'll be added.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if you're going to ride a bus, this is what the district will do to help you. This is what you can do to help you. And the same thing for coming to school.
Okay, that's where the enforcement is going to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I think that's all I have for now. Sorry.
Oh, this is what we wanted, Jen. Thank you. Mr. Ricca, do you have anything on the masks you'd like to share with us?
Well, I have flying to Alaska on the 3rd of July. I have to wear a mask in the airport, on the everything else. After that happens, I'd really have a better idea of what a mask does to you. But yeah, as far as safety wise, especially with not being able to socially distance apart or whatever, I think a mask is the very next best thing. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Was I muted? Did you hear me?
Oh, we heard you. We heard you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy your trip to Alaska.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, it'll be a lot cooler.
Yeah. Any other input for the collaborative conversation on masks?
No, I would just add that I agree with that statement that you had up earlier, that there are going to be some opportunities where you don't have to wear a mask during the school day. So I don't think we can just say masks are mandated from when you enter the building till you leave the building. And I think there's going to be times when we can highly encourage them, and we can use education, and we can use all the safety precautions.
We could even put up signage that says, are you, the only person in this room? The mask-free zone. Or you could put, if there's less than 10 people in this room, mask-free zone. Above 10, masks on, something like that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, or there could be a day where an instructor takes their class outside or has it in the courtyard where there may be an opportunity not to wear a mask. So that's why I think that sentence that you have at the end of that is important.
I love that idea. That creates that consistency. So feel free to build those and mail them to me. No, I'm kidding. You can help us, but we can also do it. Aaron, did you want to say something?
Could I chime in, please, just for the board to consider? As if I hear you correctly, you are interested in what Gretchen is saying about some areas being places where you don't need a mask and some places where you absolutely need a mask. And with that in mind, I would just ask the board to consider the language of the mandate or the language of the encouragement being the vehicle that's going to help us do this, right? Because if you're going to have a situation where there is different, if you have a situation where there's different scenarios, then why mandate it and potentially create a fire in the community when you can generally encourage it and then mandate it in specific areas? It just feels like we would work with our community better. That's just a consideration.
Thank you.
Yeah, easy language in that regard might be just that since wherever you are that you can't social distance, that there's so many numbers plus, then a mask is mandated. So you have to have it when you go in, and then it's the other takes effect. You have to have it on the bus.
Right, and I think the rationale that goes along with it and the unified mindset, state and local and national and world, honestly, on the safety. I think Aaron is an excellent wordsmith, so we'll put together some language and then send it to y'all. Then we could just keep it going, keep it until we nail what we all agree on. Oops, I mute myself to keep going. Am I sharing a screen right now? No, I am not.
No.
I'm going to now go back to so you'll see where I said move to the slides presentation. We've done that piece. I really appreciate the dialogue that we've had amongst this group today, which represents a lot of what I've heard outside of this workshop as well. So Mrs. Trujillo, do you want to pick up on the health office protocols real quickly?
Okay, so we're going to have the students screened as we briefly talked about before they enter campus. Pretty much if a student has a fever of 100.4, they'll go to the nurse's office or the health attendant's office where they'll be assessed and they have to go home. And then if they're assessed and they go home due to illness, they have to be fever-free for 72 hours without any medication. And we also have the link that we had looked at for the release from isolation guidelines. There's a link in there that will help us know where it was a little bit earlier. I think let me get further down. We had looked at it previously. Other things we're at is any visitor who comes to school will be required to be screened. And they have a visitor attestation form that they must fill out. And they have to be a visitor that has a set purpose there. DCS, will have a mental health. They have to be screened and they'll have to adhere to our policies. We're also going to make sure, I skipped this one. This was
Mrs. Trujillo. I'm just going to have you, I'm going to make a note here based on our conversation. And I don't see it here, but all visitors will enter the school wearing a mask and then go through that process?
Okay, yes, we can add wearing a mask there. Another thing we're doing is we're making sure every teacher, classified employee who deals directly with students has a little first aid kit, because we want less transition in the hallways with the kids who need to go to the nurse for a little scratch and things like that.
Can I ask a question about something you said
Yes.
very beginning? You said a fever of 104 will be sent to the nurse's office.
100.4.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. We'll do the first aid kits to reduce. Visitors will have to check into the office, fill out the screening, and they're going to have to wear the mask. And then our nurses are going to monitor kids who are out along with the attendance officer, so we can sort of keep track of who's out and for what reason. And when they're in the nurse's office, they're going to ask and review all those COVID questions with them, all the symptoms, and call the parents to pick them up. It's pretty much, if you have a fever, you're going home. All right, any questions? Because that's pretty much.
So if they have a fever or any of the visible signs of illness,
they're going to be sent home.
They may have to go home without a fever with other visible signs of illness. Okay, good.
And the only other thing we talked about in our committee is if we're sending someone home because we suspect they have COVID or they have an illness, we're going to have the parents meet us at the front of the building and not have the parents come in too. To pick them up, the health attendant will take them out.
Thank you, Director Trujillo. Director Moreski, would you like to talk about the employee piece on health and safety?
Yes, thank you. Mr. President and members of the board, continuing the conversation on the safety, we'll move into staff members. So within the staff section, we have shared just some of the steps that the district has taken to ensure a safe environment for all staff. We have also identified things that employees can do to protect themselves while at work. Ensuring a safe workplace will definitely require all of us working together. We believe the district and its employees have a shared goal of stopping the spread of COVID-19 and staying safe and healthy. For these reasons, we are asking employees to self-assess for symptoms prior to reporting for work on a daily basis. If employees are ill, they should remain home. If employees do not have the equipment, such as a thermometer, to be able to self-assess at home, they will have the option of being privately screened at work on a daily basis.
So we're not screening employees?
So this was a big topic of conversation. I know there are employers who are doing the temperature checks. We talked about doing that. It's legally permissible for us to do the temperature checks. One of the considerations that we really talked about was two things, really. We're required, if we do that kind of a test, to have it done privately. And so moving, say, a school with maybe 80 staff members through a process where we do temperature checks in a private location could be quite time consuming. Not impossible, but just time consuming. We also talked about, some employees might not feel comfortable with having someone take their temperature. So we looked at both options really, and kind of looked at the piece of them doing a self-assessment at home and being able to attest when they come to work that they are free from fever, free from symptoms of COVID, and kind of going back to that shared goal, hopefully, that we all have of providing that safe workplace where we can all come and be healthy.
So they're going to sign an attestation every day, or they're going to sign an attestation at the beginning of their employment saying that they're going to screen every day?
We've actually discussed both of those options. We could do something that is more of kind of a blanket when they come back to return to work, have them sign something. We could have a daily attestation where they're saying that they're free from all of these symptoms. If we do that, we'll have to think through the process of what the storage of that information looks like. It is considered part of their medical file. And so ultimately all of those records would need to find their way to human resources and be stored as part of their medical file away from their confidential file.
Just send out a PandaDoc. Send out a PandaDoc at the beginning of every day. They put it on a scheduled reminder.
What is it again? What did you call it?
A PandaDoc? Are you not doing Panda? What are you doing?
Oh, DocuSign?
DocuSign.
Okay.
You could do a DocuSign.
I thought you said something new. I wanted to write it down and
DocuSign. But I think, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're going to be lining students up and screening them, I mean, a teacher could be a super spreader. They come into contact with, especially a high school teacher. We're putting a lot of risk into somebody that says, oh yeah, I checked, when, we don't know. I can tell you that, my son had a 102 fever and was jogging on the treadmill and didn't even know he was sick until he reported for work. So you don't necessarily feel it. So we need to be, we need to trust our staff, yes, but we also have to put these safety protocols in place for everyone, in my opinion.
And I would agree with Ms. Shumway. I think that somehow employees have to be tested. If we're testing every student when they walk in the building, and I understand that it needs to be a private thing, but maybe it can be highly recommended that the staff be tested, and that can make it a little more public.
We did talk about that. I don't know if Angela, you even got a chance to get to that part yet, but the self-assess, everybody's going to be self-assessing, students and staff members at home. That's everybody. There are multiple layers, but we also talked last night about self-assess at home. We talked about having multiple points of entry for staff, multiple people assessing, multiple private places. We calculated how much time it would take. We also said, and correct me if I'm wrong on the language, Angela, but self-assess at home and the availability of a private assessment when you get to work.
Mm-hmm. We did discuss that and would definitely make that available. If another piece that we considered was, well, if we are going to do the mandatory temperature testing at work and go through a couple screening questions, how could we accomplish that in a way that would, we wouldn't have lines of staff basically standing there kind of waiting to get to their classrooms and such. And so we talked about maybe setting up some type of a schedule where the principals would figure out what it looks like to test staff, and it wouldn't necessarily be like literally as they're walking in the door to the building, but within a certain span of time after they arrive at work, because we do have staff who are also arriving to work at very different times. We have some of our transportation folks that are arriving, I think, as early as 3 or 4 in the morning. Some of our custodial staff arrives, I think, probably around 6 or earlier than that. And then it just kind of goes on from there. So trying to figure out what would be a reasonable kind of way to work, have the people who are going to do the testing work their way around to the staff that they're assigned to.
Well, you can have testing stations or check-in stations set up at a specific time, and then if someone arrives at work outside of that time, they go to the health attendant like a student would. That's not too much to ask, and I'm hesitant to use this passive language of may or encouraged. I think we set ourselves up for failure in that, because we're going to have those that think they're healthy as a horse, right? And probably will never go get checked. And then if it's such a big deal, right? If you're concerned that you're going to be targeted or pointed out because you go and get checked, doesn't that create a bigger problem than, hey, everybody gets checked. We're just gonna go get checked versus, oh, I think I better go get checked, right? So I think if we're just clear that people entering the building, guests, staff, students, get checked, that's what happens. And what that looks like can be flexible, but I just think we need to be clear about that.
And to piggyback, I agree. I also think it would be good role modeling for the students if they see the adults getting checked, especially their teachers. I don't understand this private thing. This is a beyond HIPAA issue. The results would stay private, but getting the test, it needs to be done like everybody's.
Yeah, and it could be just a matter of scan your temp. Here's your temp card. Here's what you temped at. Go sit down at your computer, log into your email, answer those questions in a DocuSign, type in what your temp was that day, and move on. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And those questions don't even have to be done at the time of temp. We can't hear you, Gretchen.
Every time a DocuSign is used, it costs. So if everybody every day was using DocuSign, you're talking, and Aaron could jump at thousands of dollars. So you have to look at, it's called, you purchase DocuSign envelopes, and every envelope, it's almost like buying a stamp, costs a certain amount of money. So we could come up with a system. It won't be DocuSign, but I wanted Angela, because this is kind of where this is the same conversation exactly that we had in recent days when we asked about the privacy piece. And will you share a little bit about that, Angela?
Absolutely. So I try and do my due diligence with research and making sure that, hopefully we're staying on the side of the laws that are in place, that, we're legal and we're not compromised in any way. And as part of that research, I was kind of definitely seeing that, I think it's been a little bit of a stretch even to allow employers to do temperature checks, but I think because of the times that we're in, that's something that they have said, okay, you can do that as a screening measure. But I'm still seeing in place that because it is a medical test, staff as our employees are entitled to have that done in a private manner and in a private area, and that we have to be super careful about the storage of any documents that we collect because they would be considered medical records. So I will absolutely continue to, stay on top of things because they are evolving. But the latest that I saw on that, we do need to be careful about the privacy issues surrounding that.
Well, a private area could just be a curtain pole.
It could, yes. Yeah, it doesn't need to be a separate room or anything.
So we don't need to make a big deal about what's private, but, if we do screen a staff member and they have a temperature of 102, they're going to be sent home, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yes. So, that's not going to be necessarily private because now we have to fill the room with a teacher, right? So while it's crazy to me that just a few months ago, we were talking about lice and sending students home for lice. And here we're talking now about this pandemic. But, we said we were going to make decisions for the health of the school. And, if it meant we were going to, ask someone to leave the school because they posed a threat with lice, this is so much bigger. So to say that we don't want to hinder anyone's rights by taking their temperature just seems outrageous to me.
I don't believe we said that.
Oh, no.
I don't want to go there either.
Okay,
so
good.
That's what I want to see, that we are doing our due diligence to check and come up with some way. I know it's probably difficult, but I think we should do it to make sure that our staff when our students arrive are healthy.
Okay.
And absolutely, my goal is to hopefully give you kind of all of the different research and perspectives that I'm seeing out there, and where there might be kind of little landmines we need to be careful of. But definitely, whatever the direction of the governing board is, we can figure out how to make that work with as minimal risk as possible to the district and to make employees feel comfortable.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. So as we just talked about, if employees do report for work and they have a fever of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, they will be sent home. So absolutely, if they have other symptoms, they may be sent home. So the quarantine, there's a lot of, we put a lot of information in the quarantine and isolation section of the document. So employees may choose to voluntarily quarantine. So if they have been exposed to somebody that tested positive for COVID-19, what we would want or encourage them to do is to quarantine for the 14 days. If the employee is actually ill or has tested positive for COVID-19, in that situation, they should self-isolate at home. And what we did in this section is we really took the guidance that is consistent with what the CDC recommended, as well as Arizona Department of Health Services, as to when it would be deemed safe for the employee to return to the work site. So we really tried to make it very easy to kind of go through this section if you're an employee and you're looking at this and trying to decide when it's appropriate to come back to work. So it's broken down by if you are symptomatic, and then either you have tested positive, tested negative, and so forth, or whether you're asymptomatic and whether you should isolate or not. So if an employee self-quarantines or self-isolates, the guide also shows information on what process the employee should follow, which begins with normal procedures for reporting their absence. In some instances, temporary telework might be an option. However, not all jobs are conducive to telework, especially during times when schools are open. So this section also covers the type of leave the employee may use or may be eligible for, including the potential for emergency paid sick leave under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. To assist those, and I'll just kind of keep going unless you have questions, but I'm just kind of meandering down through the different sections. To assist those employees who may not have enough time to cover an absence, the district has temporarily lifted some of its restrictions on the donated sick leave procedures. So we've included some of the specifics in this guide to make it a little bit easier for people to maybe take advantage of any donated sick leave that there is. Other information included in this section is what documentation might be required upon return to work from being ill, who may be considered at high risk or vulnerable to COVID-19, and that's based on what the CDC has said, how to request workplace accommodations. So that would be employees feeling like they need some type of an accommodation in order to return to the workplace, and a reminder that any type of discrimination or retaliation with regard to any of this is strictly prohibited. So whether somebody's tested positive to whether somebody needs time off, and is not able to be at work, all of those areas. Finally, there's a brief mention, I kind of skipped over it, it's staff notifications of a confirmed COVID-19 case. So while this section is fairly brief, it has a lot of pieces to it that we're developing as we speak. This is a very important element of our planning, and we're in the midst of fully developing the process for timely notification and kind of making sure that we're completing all the proper steps in this. So I've got a good start on kind of what that notification process looks like. We'll include timelines, for how it should occur. One of the pieces in this is that if we do have a staff member who is confirmed to have COVID-19, we are obligated to protect that staff member's identity, but we can give information that's relevant to, what school they were in. We'll make individual contact with people that they have been in contact with, steps such as those. So that's kind of the staff health and safety section. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm just thinking about the Mojave County Health Department. Anytime anybody gets a test, that would be reported to, is it Deb, I think, at the health director. And at that point, don't they try to do contact tracing anyway? Or would they go through that with you?
Right, thank you. That's a great question. So contract tracing will definitely be, I think it's a shared responsibility. So if the health department gets a notification that one of our employees has a confirmed case of COVID-19, they would reach out to us, and then we would cooperate with them to provide as much information as possible so that they could do the contract tracing piece, and we would be a support to them and do any communications on our side of things to anybody who would need to know that they have been possibly, or not possibly, but exposed.
And that, of course, and that of course would apply to kids too, or parents that may have been in the school.
Mm-hmm. And if we're the ones, if an employee self-reports that they have COVID-19, we would reach out to the health department, and then they would help us with the contract tracing piece, but it would fall to HR to at least start some initial investigation as far as, who the employee has been in contact with, and go through all of those steps. So it's that protocol we will absolutely be building out. So it's very specific about what questions we ask. And there's a lot of different guidance out there as far as what we should provide to employees, even to kind of keep track of their own movements, if you will. There's technology apps, there's paper logs that people can keep track of, but all of that would be designed to help us if hopefully we won't have to, but if we do have to do a contract trace, that we'll have good information.
There is now an app on Android phones.
All right, Jerry Woolsey will take us through the teaching and learning section.
Okay, so if you'll scroll down to the top or the bottom of page 26, where we start with our social and emotional. So we've already started our training process for our social and emotional learning. The social emotional learning is a whole community process. These components are building a foundation to support and plan, promoting, strengthening for the adults and the students, and then of course practicing continuous improvement. Our coaches have already gone to their first training, and that was our first step into forming our teams. So each school will have their social and emotional learning team. It'll consist of the instructional coaches, the counselors, and then administration and whoever else administration would like on that team. So that's our next step as far as forming the team, getting the team trained, and then that team in each building will train the staff. Any questions on social and emotional learning?
I just want to say that I'm really proud of you guys. You've just putting so many things in place. It's just been, it's so much work. It's overwhelming. Thank you for all of your work.
We have a great team here, that's for sure. It sure takes all of us, so thank you. And then on to our models. So it's pretty clear and simple. We've got our on-site learning with all of our safety measures put into place as the team has already discussed. And then the option or model 2 is our online learning. So within that online learning, we have the students who will apply with their application process. And then they, on that application, it'll say, you know, I have my own device and we have internet. Oh, thank you, Gretchen. So as Gretchen is showing us, so we have that into place. Those students will come to an on-site learning center bi-weekly. So they will come in for 4 hours every other week for 1 day. And it's a good time for check-in. It's a good time for them to get that extra one-on-one help that they need. Of course, we will be using our, you know, safe distancing. So we are scheduling as that comes in your, in this packet under the appendix, there's different, you'll see the different types of structure that we have in place for all of that. So the at home, they'll work from home and then they'll come in bi-weekly. The other one is they don't want to come to campus. They want to go online, but they don't have those items. They don't have their own device. They don't have their own internet. So those students will come to an online learning center again for 4 hours, but that will be Monday through Thursday. The campuses will be at La Sanita. We're using the computer lab, and that will be our K-5. Then in the portables at Kingman High School, we'll have 2 of the rooms set up, and that will be the 612. And then another room will be set up, and those K-5 students who check in bi-weekly will go there for their check-in. It's a very structured, scheduled thing for all students to come in for that bi-weekly check-in.
And this will be, the onus of getting there is on the parents?
That's correct.
And
Yep.
what about Golden Valley and Mount Tipton students?
They will have to provide their own transportation bi-weekly. Those students, if they have their internet and their own device, they'll have to find a way to come in bi-weekly.
Are we not providing a site out there?
Oh, yes. No, not out there. No. Our sites are in town. One at La Sanita and 2 at Kingman High School.
We have discussed a satellite on that check-in day. If we need to do that, where someone could go out there, but there won't be the center site.
Ms. Woolsey, you said
Depends on
bi-weekly, so 4 hours every week.
2 weeks.
Twice a week. 4 hours every other week?
Yes.
Okay, but if they want to do online, they have no device, they have no internet, then they go to the learning center 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, so 16 hours of instruction?
Correct.
And then the rest of the instruction would be just on their own at home in a packet or something?
Yeah, our K-5 curriculum also has a component of project-based, so they could be working on their projects at home, so they wouldn't necessarily need the internet.
Okay, and so if I'm a student and I have no access to the internet, I have no device, so I'm going to do online, I'm going to go to the learning center, but I have to find my own ride to the learning center.
What's the follow-up and enforcement if that doesn't occur?
If what doesn't occur, I'm sorry.
If students do not show up for their 4 hour bi-weekly check-in?
So our policy that has not changed and the state has not gone away from it, if you miss 10 days in a row, you're dropped. So we have a compact that we already have in part of this that says, you know, I as a student will do this. I will, you know, show up for my check-ins. It spells it out. I as a parent understand I will have to take my child to the learning center. I will be available to help my student at home. And I as a teacher will keep in communication. We'll have that weekly Zoom meeting. We'll live stream, those type of things. We have that compact. So that will be gone over as well.
Okay, and we are fully prepared to expel students that don't show up for their bi-weekly check-in?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't saying expel. I was saying according to the state, if they
Withdraw.
they're just dropped.
Okay.
Of course, we would have conversation and communication prior to that,
Sure.
especially as they're learning it. But if they can't make it, we can't keep them on our rolls.
So is that when we say, sorry, dogs wanted to chime in. Is that when we say, obviously you can't adhere to online rules, then we switch you over to, you're gonna have to show up in person? Is that the second step before we just drop students?
Absolutely. So it's a constant communication between the, we have paraeducators and teachers that will oversee this. So it's a constant communication. If they don't show up, that teacher is required to get a hold of them, whether it's 5 different phone calls and 10 different emails until they get a hold of them.
Okay, I'm just
Talk
trying
about-
to wrap my head around what
Yeah.
it looks like, specifically from that teacher that's making 10 different phone calls and 5 different emails.
Yeah.
With the attendance clerk, you know, I mean, they're still considered their home school.
Mhm.
If I attend Serbat school and I'm going to go online, my attendance is still going to Serbat school.
Mhm.
So that attendance officer will do his or her job as well.
Okay, so without having a distance learning center set up for our Golden Valley or our Mount Tipton students, what's the likelihood of those students choosing that option without that equal availability?
Yeah.
Well, Ms. Dorner and I had a meeting with a parent from Meadview, and they are willing and ready to go. They've got their devices, and so I don't know what's the likelihood. I think some of them, it's very likely it will work out well, and others will end up having to get on that bus and come to school.
Is there, I mean, it would be possible for them to also get on a bus for that day that they had their check-in, wouldn't it?
Getting on the bus, absolutely. Getting home halfway through the day would require some planning.
Right.
And more resources.
Right. Because it may be possible that they're going to meet their parent and to pick them up later, or the parent brings them in and then they need the bus to ride home.
Yeah, we will always work with our families to do the best we can for them.
Yeah.
If you have a high, because you're going to be getting these back, you have a high number of students from Mount Tipton or Golden Valley that are choosing that option. That is something we can implement then.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about, I know in the past we've talked about Peach Springs students and just that they are they're experiencing a high number of cases. They are specifically at risk. And then we were talking about, you know, kind of what that process looks like even before COVID. Is there any other considerations for those students?
Yeah, we actually are working. I'm sorry, Jerry.
Oh, go ahead.
We're working with Kingman High on a specific plan for that. And that could include, we've got a collaboration going with some entities out there, having our staff go out there instead of them coming in, having the precautions in place and reducing the need to have them come in and having multiple options.
Yeah, and we were talking about that, Gretchen, where there's a center out there that they could attend, and then they could get that once bi-weekly attendance, and they wouldn't really necessarily have to come here at all.
Okay, and that's going to be communicated to them through our normal means, or are you going to have
everyone will get
community workshop? Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, finish the last question.
Well, is it going to be part of a mailing, or are you going to say, those of you living out in Peach Springs, these are your options? Or are you going to have, representatives out there to have a community like town hall so that they know their options that are specific to them?
Well, I don't think we had a town hall planned. That's not a bad idea, but we will be having like one-to-one communication with a lot of folks in those outlying areas, especially the ones that can't get in. And then we've said all along, to be honest with you, we did our parent surveys. I have an idea. We based our program on the numbers, the percentages that came through on our parent survey. Would you be interested in online if KUSD were to offer it? Kind of global now. I've kind of moved away from Peach Springs specifically. And so we built it based on the answers to those surveys. But as the pandemic is evolving, we've been recently saying, well, what are we anticipating in numbers? And if it grows, we understand our program would have to grow. But our resources are finite. So it's a huge undertaking. That's why we really are kind of anxious and excited to launch our next phase, which would be marketing. And marketing would be, it might look different to Mount Tipton, to Golden Valley, to Peach Springs. It would be specific to their needs, and then find out what they need from us. Then look at our resources and our programs and adjust. Because if really there's nobody in the in-town area that's asking for it, but a lot are asking for it, we can shift things. But we'll definitely be marketing on a one-to-one basis. We'll have, one calls and emails and the links on the website and so on and so forth. But we found those phone calls to be very powerful. So we'll continue that also. Yeah, Jerry's holding up. We've kind of have a prototype for our first marketing. We just hot off the press this morning, but it's really, we are not interested in like, here's our program and it's locked and done, right? We're interested in, okay, here's our first iterative, piece of it. Tell us what you need. Now we're going to customize it based on the needs. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. And so the schedule that you have, like Gretchen had it up there a second ago, as far as that's just what we're assuming, right? Like Gretchen said, like what if we absolutely have 0 6th graders? So that schedule is going to change. If we have absolutely, 0 high schoolers, that's going to change. So that's just a prototype of what we've come up with, but definitely everything's fluid. It's going to have to be fluid.
Right. And can I speak to that, Jerry, just real quickly? Sure. She said if we had 0 high schoolers, and on the other side of that, if this looks like an attractive option for many high schoolers, hundreds of high schoolers, then we are also ready to replace periods within the day. So if this really takes off and the high school students like the option of online, and Beth is a history teacher at the high school level, Beth might have a live period 1, period 2 history class, but she may have an online period 3, period 4 history class, because that's where the demand is. And so that would shift from a center based on numbers to a replacement. But it'd have to be quite a few, because we don't want to replace a period and then grow the numbers in the other periods that she has. So we're going to be watching the need and it's make sure we get everybody that needs what they need to them.
So along those lines, we don't know staff need yet. And so, are we going to be training all of our instructors and teachers on how to teach online in case that need comes?
So yes. So actually, Mr. Pope, if you want to join in and let them know what your plan is, that would be great.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so we kind of have a different, we have several different facet training model for our teachers. One of those that we we threw out there that got approved was platform mastery teachers. So platform mastery teachers will be based at each school. I mean, it's kind of your ed tech model, if you will, your ed tech teachers. So we're just calling them platform mastery teachers to teach teachers at their site, be it Schoology, be it Google Classroom. These will be the folks that kind of you go to and get trained or help with your online platform. On top of that, I have a couple folks on my staff that will still be doing our trainings. We'll be doing some live stream webinars that will help train folks that need extra help. So we're kind of hitting it at several different points as far as training goes.
And are you going to be, who's going to be, well, let me start it. At the last board meeting, we approved evaluators. Are there specific evaluators that will be looking at the online platform, or is it that we've purchased the suite and what the classes look like is pretty, we paid for quality, so they're quality. It's just a matter of instructing through that content?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So remember the schools open, when schools are open online format is the purchased suite to give us time to do what Mr. Pope is talking about. So in the short term, the next 9 weeks or semester, when schools are open, we use the purchased suite. We have teachers of record. Should schools close, he's talking about, and we'll do the training now too. We're going to be training our teachers all along so that anyone could move to online. If we close the schools and everyone moves to online, we're no longer using the purchase suite because we couldn't pay what we paid per student. Then it transfers to the teacher, and the teacher writes his or her lesson plans just like they would live. They have the interactive, they have the project-based learning, and it is all through the platform of Schoology or Google that they received the training in. And at that point, Shelley Eastman she's in charge of our evaluation piece, is looking at online evaluation options. So we would need to be able to pop into classes, to Zoom classes, to get into the Schoology, to see the lessons that were posted. It's a whole nother evaluation route should we close and everyone becomes an online teacher. Does that make sense? We'll have the purchased curriculum in the short term, and then we'll become our own online in the long term where everybody is an online teacher.
It does make sense. But knowing that, we may have 10 high school students choose to attend on ground, because those high school students might appreciate the flexibility of online, then that puts a lot of high school teachers, the onus now on them to be able to teach online, which many may not feel comfortable unless they know where that support is and they know, right, or at least have had that training. So we need to be flexible right off the bat, and we need to be prepared and trained because we don't know what that, how that's going to equilibrate at the end. And that might also work for, the elementary students, because parents might want to keep their kids home. So we just need to make sure that all teachers are prepared to go online if the need arises, because we don't want to be laying anybody off because they can't go online.
Right.
So
that training starts now. We're not waiting on the training. And then Mrs. Woolsey has built into the plan with Mrs. Eastman that even the live classes, if you're a live on-site teacher, there will be digital lessons on a weekly basis to prepare and to practice with support in place while you're still live. So
it's more of the norm. So it becomes the norm, right? When everyone is in school, in the physical school, weekly, they will all log into their Google Classroom or Schoology, and they will have a lesson. So that becomes the norm. So if that happens again and we do shut down, everyone's very familiar with it. Hopefully we'll be open long enough for Robbie and his training crew to really have had the opportunity to do quite a bit of training and show them all of those little tricks that each Schoology and Google have, so those teachers can really feel safe and familiar with it.
You're saying that each classroom on ground will be required to have some sort of digital component Is that digital component going to be required at home? Because you know what the argument's coming next, right?
What do you mean at home? I'm sorry.
Is that digital learning that's going to be a piece of the on ground? We're transitioning them, right? We're getting them used to the norm.
Do the
Right.
kids have to go home and do it? If they don't have a device at home, can they?
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, we were going to have them do it at school
At
on their
school.
laptops.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it was going to all be done on site.
So both sides are trained at the same time.
Right.
Have we leveraged any of our muscles? Because we're a big school district. With the internet companies here, have we had that conversation with our internet companies for our students, for our community? Because I know we could probably link hands with MCC, because we all have the same complaint for access and affordability.
I had a meeting with Dr. Klippenstein, Jen, a couple weeks ago, where we had this very conversation about joining forces and getting with our local providers. During the closure, it was easy because they just made it available to students. We had to take some extra measures to make sure our staff had it. That was something we were willing to commit to as a district, but we don't know that that same provision will be made going forward. So we are going to schedule a meeting with all of us and our providers in the near future to see what's available. And I think I like your term, use our muscles, because it's a big deal, and it's probably going to happen if we're all being honest.
I wanted to interject at this point something I've thought about earlier during the HR component. If a teacher is going to have to quarantine, whether they've been tested positive or if they are concerned, had exposure, or just had a little fever that it ended up being an ear infection or something, do we have it in place, or can we have it in place where they can transition to be teaching online classes and relieve an online teacher to do classroom, so we can reduce how many subs we use?
We've gone around that one quite a bit, Beth, because we've had a lot of teachers already volunteer to be the online teacher. And, from the 612, we don't need an online teacher. We need teachers of record, and there will be payment. Because one thing I was committed to with our staff after the closure, they felt overwhelmed at the idea of having a live class and having to manage online at the same time. So we said no one will be forced to do online and live at the same time, but you can volunteer to do that. And we've had a lot of volunteers at the 612 level to be teachers of record. At the elementary level, there's only one or two positions that right now would be totally online. And so there might be a long line for those one or two positions. So to answer your question, no, there really is not a lot of opportunity. If more than a few people need a telework, or more than a few people want to be an online person, it's not going to be that easy.
What's the status of our sub pool?
Mrs. Mareski's had Wendy Kuffleitner working on that since last April. We wanted to maintain relationship and communication, so she could fill us in on that.
I apologize, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's in the 80s. So we have over 80 substitute teachers who are interested in coming back and looking forward to joining us for the 2021 school year.
And one of our strategies, Mrs. Trujillo, did you want to share the one strategy about subs?
Yes, one of our strategies is going to be to have a sub assigned to each campus, like a full-time sub there. So if a staff member gets ill, we automatically have someone who can go in. They'll be familiar with that school's procedures in the cafeteria and all the good stuff to go with it. And we thought by having that assigned person to that campus, it would really help us out.
Excellent.
Okay, Mrs. Woolsey, I don't know where you are in yours, but you can keep going.
Oh, we're at the Cambridge part, and I'll give the mic to you.
Okay. Mrs. Margaret Stevenson Smith, our Cambridge coordinator, has been in and working with me and her Cambridge staff to create a vision and a procedure for Cambridge Online. You can't purchase the curriculum for Cambridge like you can for an English 1, 2, 3, 4 or American US history and those kinds of classes. So the agreement we have for Cambridge Online is we've already got volunteers for Cambridge teachers who will use Schoology, and whatever they're doing in the live classes Monday through Thursday will be transferred into Schoology. So if you're a Cambridge student and you can't be at school or choose not to be at school, whatever reason is that you end up online, then your Cambridge teacher would remain your teacher and your Cambridge curriculum would remain your curriculum, and you'd have the opportunity to do it in distant learning format. And that was kind of, and the unique piece about it, because we are a district-wide Cambridge program. We're not Lee Williams Cambridge, Kingman High, White Cliffs, Kingman Middle. We're district Cambridge. There's one like IGSE year 1 teacher, one IGSE year 2, one first year math. And regardless of which campus the student's home campus might be, they would be in that one district Cambridge class, which is, to me, that's kind of a neat opportunity to explore some new models going forward. So we're trying it out there. The fun part, how do we pay for this plan, Mr. Sherman?
Mr. President, members of the board, my section kind of lays out with some important information for our staff with the date of opening pushed back to the 3rd. We had different people reporting at different times, and consequently, at least a few groups of our employees going without one check or a partial check. And so I listed out basically when do you report and when you can expect your first check. I also get in here, I mentioned that some important information. I mentioned that we're going to get rid of perfect attendance indefinitely. So not telling them it's over forever, but that it is suspended now because we don't want to incentivize sick people coming to school. I get straight into the reporting. I lay out the pay schedule for them, try to give them an idea of how their benefits will lay out. I make it clear that this is just what we have right now, with the approved opening on the 3rd. After that, I get into the biggest change for people regarding their pay. First is that we're moving paydays to Thursday. Currently, they're on Fridays. And for people who are not on direct deposit, we're going to move to pay cards. This makes it so we don't have the biweekly gathering at the district office for paychecks. It's something I've considered for years because of the convenience and the efficiency, but with COVID and this situation, it was the time to move forward. So I move forward, I tell them that we're doing it, what day it starts, and then basically get into a Q&A that I thought would be helpful for them regarding the cards themselves. A lot of the people who aren't on direct deposit in our district aren't on it because of some personal financial situation with a bank. And so we tried to lay all that out, make them feel a little bit better. Already we've seen several employees move to direct deposit, and expect the pay cards to kind of be limited to those folks who absolutely don't want to be at a bank. So before I move into the money and the budget, I'll give you a chance if you have any questions about any of the stuff I've talked about so far. Okay, and so when we get down to our budget, let me get down there myself. The first thing I do is I kind of list everything out in just written form. So, and I've grouped that by compensation and benefits, services, supplies, and equipment and technology. You will see on the supplies that some face mask costs are included, whether that's going to be whatever plan we pick. We expect to spend some money on that, and I know that the board would still need to hash that out, or the district administration. But anyway, I try to lay out what our budget's looking at right this moment and make it clear that it'll be revised down the line, and then I would update it in this document. So once I go through that piece, I get into basically what's the current budget right now. And so I've provided a breakdown of the district's current COVID related budget. I've give an idea of what each of those things are, and I've kind of said where that funding's coming from. Is it the CARES Act, the federal assistance that's been brought up by Beth? Is it our operational funds, M&O and capital, etc.? So I'm just trying to give people an idea of how much money we have for COVID, how we have currently allocated it at this very moment, and what that looks like. So you see, even on this first budget, we still have roughly 300,000 that's not tied to any specific items. And that's where we're going to retain the flexibility that's clearly needed as we go through these discussions. You know, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do there? So we still have some money freed up. But when I did like a sample closure budget on the next figure, basically what's it look like if we go on a 6-month district closure using that same amount of funds? And so you see, I ramp up the spending at the level of technology and getting that into the hands of our students. And I ratchet back all of the items related to daily safety, right? Because if you're closed for 6 months, you're not going to need as much disinfectant and things like that. Also, stuff the board may want to consider on an extended closure, actually closing. We would want to consider closing some schools down for no use at all. That's including the electricity and anything like that, the water, because that's where you're going to really save money. If you keep these buildings open, then you're going to keep paying for those buildings, whether there's people in them or not. Yes, the consumption is different, but there's still a baseline cost. So that's how I lay out a potential closure budget. And then the last piece I just want to talk about, we're ordering a ton of bulk supplies. And how are we going to distribute that, right? Cutting it evenly among our sites would make 0 sense. We have sites of different sizes. We also have sites of different need with groups of self-contained students at some schools and some at not. So I worked with the special education director to ensure that I counted for those schools with a high population of self-contained students. We did that by essentially counting them as 2.5 students versus a regular ed non-self-contained student as 1. And so we'd be remiss if we were to say that gloves and face masks and things like that aren't going to be needed at IT, district office, transportation, and maintenance. And so I used their staffing at those to go along with the enrollment at the other schools to create this allocation. You'll see in transportation, I set their staffing or enrollment, so to speak, at 1,000. That's based on usage, right? Transportation is going to have a high use of these safety supplies as they turn over buses every day. So again, with academic services, we talked about, and the special education director, we talked about what that would look like. And so that's how we agreed on the allocation for transportation. So the important thing to look here is that whatever we buy, 100,000 boxes of gloves, it's gonna go through this filter system, and that's how it'll be dispersed as well as inventoried at the warehouse. So we're keeping them inventoried at the warehouse based on this very allocation so that our warehouse manager will know when a school is running low. They're officially running low because we know that they were given the items based on this allocation. So with any luck and some training, which we started weeks ago, we should be able to keep the distribution of all these bulk supplies really clicking efficiently and have the stuff at the schools that people are needing. And we have a lot of the stuff we have received already off of our first order. And so if you wanted me to talk about that, I could. Other than that, some things we're purchasing really quick will be more strategic implementation, such as the hand sanitizer stations or the plexiglass separators. Those will go more to schools based on where we think they're needed. Those won't be allocated. These are just for bulk supplies. So that is the end of me speaking, and I'll entertain any questions and love to hear any discussion if there is any. Thank you.
Mr. Sherman, I just wanted to point out, I'm back on the COVID original budget page on the IT, 1,600 new student devices and hotspots. part of what we started to do on our school reopening plan is to also plan for school closures. We don't want to be caught in a corner. And so we looked at how many, and Rob can jump in here if he wants, how many devices we have district-wide. Chromebooks, I think 4,300, Mr. Pope?
4,500 in
40, right. And so what can we carve out of the CARES money to purchase some more devices? Because our plan, as you know, should we close again, is to be 100% online, no packets. And so this is where you kind of see that reflected when you see hotspot subscriptions and student devices. And so then that would give us, if we were to close, the 4,500 plus the 1,600. If we needed to distribute, hopefully we don't have to distribute that many, because we know anything we distribute is an at-risk distribution that it may not return. But in case you were wondering about hotspots and devices, I just wanted to share that we were doing that. And then as he moves to his closure related budget, that remains in there and more funds are shifted. That's why it grows.
Oh, that should actually say 4,000, Gretchen, my
Not
mistake there.
1,600.
Yeah, that I bump it to 4,000 with a longer a 6-month hotspot subscription.
So we're just, I'm excited about the opportunity, if we were to close, to get everybody the resources they need to fully experience high quality online education. And we did submit, we have in our back pocket, I don't know where it is in the process, but we did submit our own AOI, Mrs. Woolsey.
Yep, we hit submit yesterday morning, and now we sit and wait. If we score an 85.7 or higher, then they will give us our the right to have our own entity online school. Within 6 months, they'll come and do an audit on it. And if it passes the audit, then we'll have our permanent identification number.
Right.
But right
so
now, we just hit submit.
We have short-term, long-time, and forever plans. And our forever plans are, can we have our own online entity for people who cannot make it to the school, and that we have our own platform, our own teachers, our own evals, our own training. We're pretty excited about that.
Yes.
All right. Mrs. Mareski had 2 pieces of the manual, and so this, Angela, did you want to talk about FMLA and what happens if someone needs leave, or do you feel like you already covered that?
Mr. President, members of the board, I believe I've covered a lot of it. This is just more the policy piece to kind of lay out, you know, what the qualifying reasons are for taking leave, what the pay component looks like, any documentation or anything along those lines that you would have to provide as support. So it just is expanded family and medical leave. So that is really very specific to if, as an employee, you are unable to come to work because of childcare. So your child's school is closed, the daycare is closed. So that is specific to that, and it just goes through it. And then the emergency paid sick leave is also contained in that policy as well. And let's see, trying to see where. I think it's down, oh, there it is. So that's through, again, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So the emergency paid sick leave, that's a maximum of 80 hours of leave that someone could potentially qualify for. The reasons or the qualifying reasons are listed there 1 through 6 under the eligibility. And there is forms included in the appendix to request either the expanded family and medical leave or the emergency paid sick leave. The sick leave goes through December 31st of this year, and it doesn't carry over. So if somebody does need it, they would use it between now when school opens and the end of the calendar year. And then the other policy that we included in here was just a telework policy. So now that we're going to be reopening, the potential for telework opportunities is significantly reduced, but there could be those occasions, especially if we have to close schools again, where we wanted to have something a little bit more formalized as far as what are the expectations, what does the policy look like, and we included a telework agreement in the appendix section of the document as well. So this would be something that the supervisor and the employee would work together on to develop, you know, what is it that I'm going to be doing at home as an employee? What are the expectations? What equipment do I need? Those types of things. And it does say temporary. There really aren't a lot of jobs that we could imagine as an essential employer, you know, being completely telework oriented, but definitely there are those opportunities. So we wanted to be prepared with these documents in the event that somebody needed it in an emergency, if we close, or as an accommodation as well.
What does the DO look like right now, as far as telecommuting, and is that going to continue?
No, we're not teleworking at the DO, the district office.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's everybody every day here.
And you can still maintain social distancing with everyone there?
Yeah, we will quite often have our meetings virtually from our offices. We are watching the numbers. You know, if our community continues to evolve as it is, we may revisit and let you know when we do, reducing numbers here. But so far, most of us are here, all of us are here every day, and a couple of people have had some vacation days here and there.
I can imagine, I mean, if we get to that point where the DO has to look different as far as who's coming to work and who's attending virtually, we'll be making bigger decisions at that point anyway.
Yeah, our team has been here and exhaustively working. It's big. They're big decisions. I appreciate the time you guys are giving us today. We've had so many conversations, and it seems to be changing by the minute, right? We'll have a big conversation on a Monday, and then we come in Tuesday with different research and different parameters. And so we're trying to stay with it, stay ahead of it, have multiple plans based on what we see happening. And yeah, this is a great team. All right, so any other questions for Angela on telework or the HR piece? I won't go through all of it, but we wanted you to see examples. We will have the same signage at every campus. Mrs. Trio they're already printed, they're already laminated, they're already ready for distribution. Everybody will have the same signage. I really love the idea, Jen, about building that mask signage in there too. So we'll work on that next under, you know, the when and the where and what does it look like and the why. So we'll add that to the appendix. But we're really in agreement on our team and with this manual on consistency. And I've used this phrase recently, and it sounds negative, but it's important to consider that there will be no outcome without outrage. Whatever we decide, you know, and however much work goes into the manual, and we care about our staff and our students and our community so much, but we know we can't meet the needs of everyone. We've been transparent. This will go live after we make some of the edits after today. We want everybody to know what we're doing all the time. And with that comes some passionate and emotional dialogue. And so I just want to say to anyone watching, keep the conversations going and keep emailing us and keep your opinions headed our way. We really want to know what everyone has to say. We want to know how you're feeling, and we want to figure out how to be supportive in whatever final outcome we arrive at. So that basically concludes, you know, the work so far in the manual. I just want to revisit, board members, some of the things I heard today. And we had a lot of conversation about mandating. I hear several of you saying mandate as much and as often as possible. A couple of you saying mandate. Well, one of you said don't mandate at all. Another one said mandate in certain locations. And I think we evolved to maybe putting some parameters and guidelines. Like if you're in a room alone, feel free to take your mask off. If there's more than 10 of you in the room, it better be on. So we'll get very specific and get that back to you. I know our staff is very interested in knowing, our parents are very interested in knowing. That's the one topic I get asked about daily. So we'll make that happen quickly. We will look at that storage piece. Everybody will have masks with them. How can we manage those and keep them near the kiddos? I heard ideas on lanyards and clips, and we can even have cafeteria cards associated with that. We'll revisit the water fountain and maybe not allow drinking out of fountains that require the mouth down to the water piece. We will, I heard a little bit of conversation about maybe revisiting the bus procedures as far as being careful not to make a student feel isolated or set to the side with a shield. We'll re-talk about that. If someone has any suggestions, feel free to pump in. We're going to look at the travel based on the numbers of online kiddos to make sure Golden Valley, Mount Tipton, and outlying areas have opportunities for that once every 8 days. If we have to go to them, or if there's large numbers, we'll go to them, or how we can get them to us. We'll revisit that. Oh, the staff screening, we'll relook. I'll get with HR. We already have all of them. Angela already has a screen everybody every day plan, so that's super easy. We can revisit that with the principals on what that could look like so that we're consistent there. Did I miss anything on my notes?
I'll just comment that I think the shields for the kids on the bus are not going to end up being a problem, because they're going to see some teachers with face shields. They're going to see some other people with face shields. So it might actually make them feel special. Who knows?
Face shields are cool. Okay.
Could I ask? I think it was just one question that I had finance related. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
I just what direction we have on with our mask plan, whatever that looks like, on paying for those 4 per student and staff member, or putting it on them. I don't know if I'm clear there.
I did hear one opinion that just like a uniform, it should be a piece of the mandated uniform and on the family. I think Jen, I think you shared that thought.
Yeah.
Were there any other thoughts on that? That's a good question, Aaron.
I was wondering.
Aaron has it in his budget. I think it's something that the district can provide.
I was thinking we might want to do 2 plus some disposables, so that we have disposables available. We have more funds for face shields, and especially for some of our special ed students that are hearing impaired. We're going to want those masks with the clear, so that they can use it. The teacher can, if they've got a shield on, the student can communicate with others or whatever. They've got the masks that have the clear part for reading lips.
I think that we might be entering a slippery slope if we start out providing. I think there might become an expectation.
Right. No, it's just the 2 for the beginning of the year. The fabric is all I was thinking of.
Yeah, I'm talking about the fabric. And then, there's the question of, are they going to get laundered? That's an important component of wearing a cloth mask. But we can't really check that. So
either way,
and that's really not on us to launder them. So, we could provide them. That could be, a kind thing to do. But I think when you start out and say, okay, here's your 4, there might be an expectation that you come back for more. So I think that we, again, with the passive language, avoid the expectation that we are solely responsible for your safety. I think that as long as we communicate the clear expectations, ahead of time that you will wear a cloth mask and that will be part of your uniform, then the onus is on them.
I can come out of the passive language world now that with guidance and really come down on exactly what we expect.
Did you receive where you have that budgeted in your amount? I'm assuming you're using COVID related funding for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've already got the paper face masks. We got a big order of those because we thought that was going to be at a minimum. We were going to need some as needed. I've secured a quote, or my team and myself have secured a quote for 35,000 masks at half the price that was on Gretchen's slide. And I got that information maybe 5 minutes before we came in here. So
about N95s?
No, I'm talking about, when we say paper masks, we talk about the disposable 3-ply little thing that goes on your face, not N95s. Yeah.
Okay,
So
and now what you're talking, the 35,000, you're talking about the cloth masks?
Yeah, when I say 35,000 cloth masks, because if you go with the mandate, you're going to need something that's sustainable, and cloth is sustainable from the district side, but we can get 35,000 for about half as much as originally thought. So it's not a big expense, and it may solve that issue as far. And I remember with I don't remember, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we went to uniforms, students were received like a first batch of clothes from the district. That is what I've been told since I worked here, but I wasn't here during the shift to uniforms.
I don't think that was the case. I think maybe that if there was a hardship.
If there was a hardship, for sure.
It was only hardship. Okay.
Yeah, it was only hardship, but they were sold at the school.
Right.
Maybe we could say the same thing. If you're having a hard time getting your masks, we recommend you have 4 so you could do a weekly launder. But if you're having a hard time getting them, then see whoever.
Go see Aaron.
Just pass it out. I think that we would be sending the wrong message.
I don't know. I think we're sending the message that we're supporting a free and appropriate education for all students. And that's part of their current free and appropriate education. That's just that's my standpoint. If we mandate it and we say, I see both sides of it, but to me, it feels like a part of their free and appropriate education. Not the constant replacement. Like if you lose your book and you have to buy another one, but the start out, I don't know.
Okay.
That's just
well,
me.
as long as it's clearly communicated that this is, your start.
Yeah.
You are responsible.
Without being enabling or taking advantage, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I had a question too. When will those masks be delivered? How are parents enrolling their students this year?
Good question. We have started online enrollment. We are no longer a paper enrollment district. So the delivery of the masks is a good question. I don't know if Robbie or Jerry wants to get on and talk about it, but we're super excited about the online enrollment piece and reducing numbers via that vehicle. But that is, I don't know, unless someone else has that planned. That's a good question. I don't have a plan for that.
Well, that's where that component of we have them available if you need them, because I mean, once we mandate them, they're going to be finding their favorite Superman fabric, and they're going to be customizing them, making them cool. So that's the reality of it. So if they need them because they don't have them, we can say that they can pick them up at their school. They can contact someone at the district office, but to try to disseminate all of these masks because we have allocated 4 per child, that does pose a problem.
We did talk a little bit. You bring about something we did discuss, and that part of the reason we went to standard uniforms, standardized shirts, was to reduce variability, to reduce the who has, he has, she has, for safety. And then we talked about masks and just sharing. We had a very long conversation about if shirts are standardized, should masks be standardized, right? If they start personalizing and customizing, are we moving away from the idea of the standard apparel notion, or
I don't think so. I think it goes along the same lines as cool Nike shoes or, you know, your standard Walmart shoes. We can't dictate that, so we're not going to. I think, especially right now when trying to get fabric and material or trying to get your grandma to make some, I think the less barriers we put up with that, the more compliance we'll have.
And I would like to add that, number one, we need to make sure that it's suggested that they get their name written on the masks, even if it's like fabric, or I don't know if a permanent marker would stay even through washes, but have some guidance on that. Also guidance on making sure that they're not going with gang colors. You know, our normal uniform code applies to the mask.
that's what I just
right?
said.
Yeah. Well, but it's, and then it was also, uniforms also were because there were so many girls wearing too low a cut, showing bellies. It was a problem.
So you're saying 2 inches up on the bridge is going to be the requirement?
No. But anything that could be deemed inappropriate, you know, that kind of thing.
If we could get maybe some community volunteers that would be willing, that we could make a list of those that have the capability to maybe embroider masks. We could send families, maybe for a nominal fee, or someone's willing to volunteer, but I'm sure there's people in the community that would be willing to embroider cloth masks for people. And is there a list of gang colors? Because I think I'm out of the know there.
I don't think you can police that in Kingman.
It's not going to be that easy, no. But there might be situations where it'd be obvious, and those are the only ones I think we can go after.
Red and blue.
Typical, yeah, red and blue are
and
typical.
black bandanas, the bandana pattern.
The bandanas.
Right, the bandana patterns, and they can't wear a bandana. It has to be an actual mask. I think is important. Again, for the same reason. I forgot.
Hello,
I lost
rabbit
my thought. Right, but it's a part of our uniform code anyway,
Right.
Our dress code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think it needs, I mean, we can pull them out for if it does, you know, go against that. I mean, if they came and they had shoelaces that had said gang colors on them, I guess we would pull them out for that, right? So or pull them aside for that. I can't even ever recall having that conversation with a student. So
I've heard of another teacher that did at one point, but there was another thing I was going to say and I can't remember. I'll chime in again when I remember. But just having guidance on what type of masks, how they can, you know, if whatever guidance we can give parents on a mask, I think would be very helpful.
Everything you guys seem to be saying seems to push back toward the idea of the district buying it and keeping it uniform, right? There's this idea of we want to control what's on their face, but maybe potentially don't want to pay for it.
No.
Okay.
I mean,
that's not
whatever
what you're saying?
what I like the idea of not necessarily supplying it if we can get away with it. That's why I was saying only 2 per student. And then they either rewear those and watch them a lot, or they find a way to make their own. Pretty soon they're going to be, you see them all over now anyway. So a lot of people are going to finding ways to make their own, or buying them or whatever. But the idea of naming, getting a name on their mask, the idea of making sure we're watching that they're appropriate, they're following, you know, dress code, that kind of thing.
Okay, well, just so you know who your superintendent is, I would like to do anything and everything I can for every family we have, so.
there you go.
So that just brings us to the end. I ran over the notes that I have. I think I know some of the pieces from our collaboration, which I really appreciate. Any final thoughts from anyone before we close, or what our next steps are? Y'all have access to this, so you'll see us immediately going back in and making some revisions, and then I would like to publish it for our community as quickly as possible.
And publishing just means you're going to put it on the website.
Yeah.
And direct people towards that. Yeah.
We'll download it as a PDF and let everybody know it's available, and the staff included.
Well, I think your return to learn guide is outstanding. I can't believe what you and the staff did in such a short amount of time. It's awesome.
Agreed. This is very comprehensive.
Yes.
Before we leave the finance piece, I just want to make sure that there is something in there to help teachers with those shared materials.
Yeah, I heard you loud and clear. I imagine a lot of that will be in their typical classroom budgets. And so I have a method that I'll go about getting some more money at their site that's not necessarily tied to COVID.
Okay. And then the idea that we're going to be doing more printings because we don't want to be sharing, that's known. Yeah.
Yeah, we have no limits on printing for any staff.
Okay.
Except for the limits of the machines themselves.
Right. And is there any sort of procedure or guidance for staff? Because I've been in that copy room when there's 20 people waiting for the machine.
Yeah, we're building a tasking list for principals. We'll have a principals meeting next. Kind of pass the baton on some of those kinds of things, like what's your meet the teacher detailed list, what are your copy room lists, how are you going to space your kids in the cafeteria, because they're the leaders on their campus, and so they'll share that with us and we'll have that available for you.
Thank you so much.
And so are we going to need to have this at our normal board meeting to approve, or should we do a special board meeting to approve? Do we need to approve it? How do we, I assume we have to vote definitely on the mask mandate.
Well,
I was a little confused with Carol's, yeah.
Yeah, that didn't make sense. Because this agenda has been posted, correct?
I thought you could add an item if you put it explicitly in the board, but she brings up a good point that I think we would need to look into.
And there is a document, that one that I was referencing.
And you guys approved something at this meeting. You voted on a termination before she got in here.
Yeah, my idea, my thinking was that as long as this was posted in a timely manner to the public, it is a board meeting, no matter what we call it.
What you can't do in a workshop is create the item during the workshop and vote on it. It has to have that 24 hours, but it's still worth a look.
I'm looking over at Star. Our board secretary is saying.
For a special meeting, we have to do a 5-day notice, and I emailed a gentleman at ASBA to find out if we could vote during the workshop.
Okay, for a special meeting, there has to be 5 days notice, and she has emailed ASBA to find out if there can be a vote in a workshop.
During the workshop, says it's been posted within the 24 hours online and on the building.
Yeah. Gretchen, I'm almost positive you can vote in a workshop as long as it's listed as action. But
yep,
that's
do you need us? Do you need us to vote on this now anyway? I mean, is it something that can be approved? And I mean, I think you have all the direction from the board, and if it's an ongoing thing that we can look at, I don't see a problem with us approving it in July.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
and it might be better to approve a completed document because there's edits that still need to be made.
Right. And then when we make those first rounds of edits, and then we make it, I'll put a disclaimer of sorts when I publish it for the public that says, obviously it's a live living document and there may be modifications. And I say that in my introduction as well, in the manual. There will be modifications made based on the landscape of what's happening. So
I was thinking that in order to be able to publish, we need to get information out to the public as soon as possible, especially about masks. If we at least vote to move forward and have that specific what we're going to have for masks as a vote.
I think you can just say it conditionally the way you are without doing a vote that's outside of what the item is, because the item specifically says to approve the return to learn.
discussion and possible, and then it also has an action listed. So I would think that we could say, as a part of the return to learn manual, we have, the board agrees and do that vote. And then, the rest of it is we agree to continue with the rest of the corrections and evolution of it.
I don't think it needs to be so micromanaged. I think we gave the guidance for masks for the return to learn manual. I think we could vote to approve the manual with edits as discussed, and then leave it at that, because we have record of those items that we wanted clarification on.
Right, but I think we've had some discrepancies on the actual mask policy. What do you say, Charlie?
I do agree, but I think that, I agree with what Jen was saying about us micromanaging it, and I think that if we can publish it, that Gretchen has put in the introduction that this is a working document and that it's subject to board approval, and we approve it in July, and then she can put, Gretchen and the committee can put the edits in there that they need. We're always welcome to go look at it. If there's something in there that we don't agree with, we can call her and definitely approve it in July. I think for the most part, she has the direction from the board.
Yeah, and the public language could just be the board conditionally approved the requirement of masks for, to include in the return to learn document that will be formally adopted at the next board meeting, something like that.
Yeah, that would probably work. I know there were at least 4 of us that want masks mandatory in some form, in the hybrid form that we're hoping to have put together.
Well, I like the language that was in the document, encouraged, and I think it said mandated when necessary or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, I agree with that.
Just trying to make sure we have clear direction for the public and for the staff.
Thank you. Best 3 hours of your week, right here with us.
3 hours and 10 minutes.
And it felt like a few, didn't it? Right?
No, it was great. It was a lot of good information.
I'm hungry.
All right. So you don't have to vote to dismiss in a board workshop. We just say goodbye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye.